We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to an edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We have plenty of questions to get to this week, so I'm going to try to keep our What We Watch section under control, but I've got lots to talk about there, and I think Tom does too. So just fair warning, we'll get to what we can get to, but before...
You might want to scroll to the hour... At the end of the first hour to see if we've gotten to the questions.
It could be what happens there, but before we get to that, we've got to get a battery update. How the heck are those SoundPEATS headphones? Are they dead yet?
82%.
82. Well, they didn't drop dead at 90, so that's been proven.
So it did. Okay, so one of the things that was bothering me was that they did not. Excuse me. They did not. Ever show under 100% on my devices. You know, you go into your what you're connected to via Bluetooth or whatever.
Looking at it on your phone there.
On my phone, it kept saying 100%, and right. I was like, I got to get it below 90.
Yes,
I'm dying to get it below 90 to see if it drops down.
Yeah.
So I got it to 89, and sure enough, it dropped down. Now it's at 90%, but it's going to stay at 90% until it gets to the end of 90, which I.
So it's in the app. It's in the app for the SoundPEATS that's saying it's at 82. But as far as your phone is concerned, it's at like 98.
It's still at 90.
Or 90, okay.
It's still at 90. So, yeah. It's ludicrous. Like,
no kidding.
I just can't get over how long these stupid headphones
for the folks who are...
And they continue to be very comfortable. My one little complaint about how the top bar hit on my head, it's technically true. I'm not going to say it's not true, but it's also like a real non-issue. It's nitpicks at the best.
Okay.
Overall, I mean, I can't get over these stupid headphones.
Yeah.
I cannot get over how long they're lasting, how good they sound. I mean, and how little they cost.
Right.
I don't know if you noticed that on AV Gadgets, we posted the day that the last podcast went live. There's a sale. They're $50 right now.
Oh, that's
with
nuts.
A coupon.
That is nuts.
They're $50. You're paying like...
How do you get a battery that lasts that long for that
$1 for every 2 hours that you can use them and then throw them away and never use them again.
Yeah, even if they don't recharge at the end of this, who cares? They lasted a year for $50.
It's been like a month, right? Is it like three or 4 weeks at this point?
Yeah.
I have not charged them.
Yeah.
They have not been like accidentally inductively charging somehow because I had them near something. They sit on a table to the side of my computer.
They don't have a little solar panel on them?
In the original box? I mean, they don't have any direct sunlight anyways. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, man. These things are crazy.
All right.
So, yes.
Yeah, for the folks who have been SoundPEATS Space. Yeah. For the folks who have been worried, we'll have to keep the podcast going at least as long as these batteries last in these headphones.
The battery, when SoundPEATS battery finally dies, the podcast ends.
Could be
it's like the doomsday clock.
That's absolutely what it is. Counting it down.
All right. For those of you who have been following and caring about the saga of my house getting fixed, it is done.
Wow.
It is done.
Holy smokes.
Okay. So I will say that there was not without drama.
No kidding.
Because we got the carpet installed and like 3 or 4 doors no longer worked because the carpet was too thick.
Yeah.
That did not occur to me. Did not occur to anybody to say anything to me about how the doors would operate afterwards.
Right.
And in fact, the brand new door they just put in the home theater the guy was like, took it off the hinges immediately. He's like, listen, it's not clearing the pad.
Right.
I'm like, oh God, that's
the solid core door. He managed to get it off the hinges. Needed some help, maybe.
Yes.
He
had 2 people there.
Okay, good.
Him. So yes, we had to have a bunch of doors shaved and everything else.
Oh wow.
But got everything in. Got my system set up. I'm going to tell you, all you people who email and tweet and everything else at us about having problems setting up your system, do not think that you are somehow not, that you're dumb or that you shouldn't have these problems. Okay,
definitely.
There's nothing about this whole. I do this. I talk about it. I've been talking about it for years. I deal with this all the time, and I still was like, well, I can't believe I made that mistake. And I made so many of them. And
it's not like you have a pile of new equipment that you're unfamiliar with that you're trying to incorporate. Like this is the same equipment you had pre-flood. It didn't replace it.
So the first thing I did was I was like, you know what? I'm not hooking up my surround back speakers.
Right.
I talk about how much I hate them. I'm not hooking them up. I'm not doing it. It's just...
I can see them on the shelf behind you there. They physically they exist.
So I was like, I'm not hooking them up.
Okay.
So I didn't hook them up.
Okay.
And then I spent the last 4 days going, I wonder if it sounds better with them. Psychology, baby.
No kidding.
Psychology. Like, I know they're back there. I'm like, is there really sound coming from behind me? Or maybe there's not sound coming from behind me.
As long as you have been ragging on SoundBax.
I know. This morning I went to hook them back up.
Oh my goodness.
Right? I'm like, how hard can it be? I just hook them back up. I just plug them in.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm like, it took me. I spent more time in the menus than I want to admit, because you can't just go into your speaker, your amp sign, and say you want 11 speakers.
Okay.
You can't just do that because it doesn't automatically enable the surround back speakers.
Oh.
I'm like, oh, well, okay, that's weird. You go into your amp assign, you have to go into your speakers settings and then enable the speaker. And in fact, my X4300 that I have actually has the ability to have a single surround back speaker. I was like, I didn't even know that was in there.
Yeah.
It's in there.
Yeah.
So had to select 2 speakers for back there. And then I had to swap a bunch of speaker wires around because I had things hooked up for 5.1.
Oh, because you weren't using the external amp anymore when you thought you were stopping at 9.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I had to set it back up.
Yeah.
And then, hey, I didn't touch anything. Those wires have been there forever. All I did was unplug them. They have banana plugs on them. What could possibly go wrong? Guess what? One of those wires is bad.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. I was like, I gotta figure out how it could be bad, but it was. And unfortunately, the one that was bad, because guess who's lazy enough to go, you know what, I only really need one surround back speaker. I'll just do the one. It was the one that was plugged into the one that the single surround back speaker
that you were going to use. Yes.
Yeah. So I was like, well, whatever. So I had to go find the speaker wire, which of course I have oodles of, and then plug everything back in and stuff like that. I'll tell you what, the Odyssey app, that $20 app.
Yes.
Oh my God, so worth it.
Oh yes.
So worth the $20.
Completely agree.
It's not the thing that I think a lot of people probably make mistakes on and they don't know that they do, because I almost did it all 3 of the times I ran the Odyssey, because I ran it more than once. Is you have to at the very end upload the curve back into your receiver.
Save and load, yes.
It is not clear that is what you need to do. It is not clear.
No.
So yes, now I have 11.2 system.
You're keeping your surround backs?
Well, I put them back in, and I just did it right before this podcast. I haven't had a chance to test it.
You haven't fully evaluated yet. And now you're
now
relying
they're
on...
in. You know I'm not going to go through the trouble of unhooking things.
You're relying on audio memory now as to whether it really sounds any different or not.
I was going to be relying on it anyways. So, yes, I have the full system hooked back up. Nice thick carpet hidden, extra thick pad underneath, which is part of the problem with the whole door thing. And, geez, really happy. Really happy.
No
I was
kidding.
like, God, this is...
What a feeling.
But again, and I'm just like every single one of you. I spend the whole time going, I don't know, does it sound right? Does it sound off? And I need to do a bunch of tests, running 2-channel music through it, make sure that the imaging is correct between the front, left, and right speakers. I need to do a bunch of other stuff. I was watching something, and the overheads were like just driving me crazy. They were so loud. And I went back into the settings, and it was like, it's on DTSX.
Neural X.
Upmixing.
That was just going to ask. That is the one that gooses those overheads.
I was like, yep, there's your problem right there. So I switched to Atmos, and it was fine. And then I switched to a different program. I'm like, no, I don't hear them anymore. So I put the DTSX Neural X back on. I was like, oh, there they are.
Oh, yes.
So, I'm just like you guys. Everybody's like, oh, well, if you have a lot of experience, you'll have golden years. You'll be able to do it. No.
Oh, no.
There's nothing about that.
I mean, if anything,
That's
you
all
second guess yourself even more, especially when it's your own system. That's what ends up happening.
So it's been a process, but now I've got everything, and I'll tell you, it was easier than I thought it was going to be. And the big thing I did was the way I had my my audio rack was traditional, right, facing out.
Sure.
But it's pushed into a closet, kind of like an open closet area, which makes the wires hard to get to.
No kidding. They're in the back there.
And then it was also pushed to the side, which made it hard to get your hand back there to plug things in and out of the wall, which is how I have some of my speaker wires run, and my HDMI cable run. So the big thing I did was I faced it so the back of the AV receiver, which looks terrible, by the way, is facing the wall that the
so everything's like sideways, basically, as you like look into the closet, things are sideways.
Yeah.
Okay.
And things are sideways, and I see the back of the receiver, which means there's no lights in my face, and I can't see what it says on the front of the receiver, which is not a big problem for me. But it gives me full access to everything that's back there. And even with that, it's still a pain in the butt.
Oh, yes.
So
it's a lot of wires.
It is a lot of wires.
Not a small amount of
wires.
wires.
So that was one of the bigger differences. And I didn't hook a bunch of stuff up. My kids my wife was like, hey, there's this game your son wants to play that won't work on your computer. I'm like, I don't care. Good. I mean, that's parenting, baby. So she's like, well, they say you can download it for the Xbox. I'm like, not in my system, you can't, because I did not hook it back up. So I do miss the Xbox. I will be honest with you. As much as the audio problems bother me, the Roku Premiere that I have has other things that bother me, probably a little bit more than the audio problem.
Right.
No, it's actually not a little bit more, because if it was, I'd hook the Xbox back up. But the reality is that the Roku's also got some issues. Yep. But I'm not hooking the Xbox back up right now, simply because it's too much. It's too much. So anyways, let's get on to what we watched now that my system is back together, and we'll start talking about all the stuff I actually watched.
Okay.
Go.
But am I going first? Okay, I'm going first. Let's go in the order that I watched these things. Last week, I talked about 2 movies that I wasn't very impressed with. This week, I got 2 movies I was very impressed with. This was a good week for the 2 movies that I watched, and I started by watching The Iron Claw. That is out, available.
It's a wrestling movie. Is that a wrestling movie?
It is, and it is a true life story. So yeah, let's get into The Iron Claw here. I don't think it's on streaming yet. I purchased this movie. I went ahead. I took a little gamble there with the money that I spent, but I don't regret it at all. Starring Zac Efron as the main character in this, although portraying a real life person. These are the Von Erichs from the professional wrestling world. And yeah, if you already know the Von Erichs, then you already know. But if you have no familiarity with this, this is a dramatization of the real life events. Things are definitely changed. The exact order that things take place in, or the amount of time in between events, and that a lot of that is all shrunk down to make it a more effective movie. And there are some very, very significant changes that are made in this movie version of the Von Erich story compared to real life. Not to really spoil anything, because of course you can look up the real life events, but the youngest brother, there were 6 Von Erich brothers, and they completely eliminated the youngest brother in this movie. He just wasn't there. He just didn't exist. So you can't say this is a completely true to life story, but it is because Chris Von Erich, the youngest of the Von Erich brothers, he could have been a movie unto himself entirely. And the director talked about this, making this movie and wanting to capture the feeling behind everything. But, why there were decisions made to change around the order of events or the span in between, or completely eliminate this person who existed in real life. And it's because this is absolutely a case of truth was stranger than fiction. The amount of tragedy that occurred to the Von Erich family belies belief. And it was to the point that they thought that if they included all of the tragedies that took place to this family, that an audience would fall into that almost torture porn area of things. Like it really happened. It's not like it would be untruthful to tell all these things, but it would seem so ridiculous to pile so much tragedy on if you portrayed every event that happened to this family in the movie, that they felt like, let's focus on like the rule of 3. Let's have 3 gigantic tragedies take place, and that will feel like a story, and it is absolutely complete, and all the parallelism is there. If you put on the 4th and the 5th and the 6th tragedies, at what point does it just feel egregious in movie terms, even though these things really did happen in real life? So yeah, also starring Jeremy Allen White, who you might know from The Bear, and Lily James. Performances of everybody was excellent throughout. Zac Efron, I mean, he was already very muscular and buff before, but to make himself look like a professional wrestler, I don't know if he took some enhancement supplements or whatever, but I mean, he really transformed his body in this. The movement that he did, and it really was him in the ring for quite a few of the scenes. There didn't seem to be much of a way that they could have faked that, although I guess with digital manipulation these days, but it looked like it was really him, and we know that he absolutely did train for this with Chavo Guerrero Jr., well-known wrestler who's become quite the Hollywood trainer for anything to do with professional wrestling, and trained with him for 6 months, so it's not like he didn't put any work into doing this. Did not wrestle at all like the character that he's portraying in real life. Did not move like him at all, but that wasn't the point of this movie. It was entirely the emotional journey. So yeah, absolutely I can give this a big thumbs up. If nothing else, when you see it, it might get you to just at least look up the Wikipedia article on the Van Eriks and see the other tragedies that took place, all the characters that weren't included, all the people who weren't included in this movie, because the other brothers, they were also married, they also had children, and there were tragedies that befell them, and none of that is included. We focus on the eldest surviving brother, and we focus on his story, Kevin Von Erich. So yeah, it's a pretty tremendous movie.
I don't know about the rest of you guys, but every once in a while you meet somebody who they start telling their story and you're like, that doesn't seem real. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It sounds so fantastical, all the stuff that's happened to them in their lives. And I maybe some people occasionally think that about me when I cut, my life seems fairly routine to me, but it's pretty interesting,
when you get into the details,
Get into the details, are like, oh yeah, when I lived in Australia, what? You lived in Australia? Sure. Oh, when we were in Thailand, you were in Thailand, yeah. And when my wife and I were traveling around what? You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff like that can sound, if you just kind of drop it out of context. But I've known people who it seems like everything that can happen to a person has happened to them. So I understand exactly what you're saying with that. All right, so what else, Rob?
I could say more about it, but I won't, just for the sake of time, because I went out to the fan preview of Dune Part 2. This has not entered wide release yet. I think that's happening this coming weekend or whatever it is.
I have heard very good things about this movie.
And it is well-deserved. This is a tremendous movie-going experience. If you are into home theater, and I assume you are if you're listening to this podcast, you are going to be champing at the bit for this disc to come out, and you're going to want to get it on disc because you want to see this movie in the largest format you can. I did see it in IMAX. You are going to want to listen to it as loud as you can. Oh my goodness, the bass rumbles in this movie. This is a no-brainer demo material showcase movie that is unequivocal. It is going to put a smile on so many home theater fans' face. But go see this movie because it very clearly is queuing up a part 3. And they have not greenlit it yet. It's not greenlit. It's not in pre-production or anything. Denis Villeneuve has said that he is very much wanting to make and stop at part 3. He's not planning to adapt all the rest of the Dune books, but he wants to do...
That's probably for the best.
He wants to do Dune Messiah. He wants to...
Dune Messiah makes sense.
He wants to complete Paul Atreides' story and Chani's story. If you are a big fan of the books, yes, there are changes made. Chani's character is fairly different from the books, and if you are just wanting to see a word-for-word literal translation of books to screen, then I suppose that could be a criticism. But Yeah, I mean, the part 2, it's funnier. There's way more action. There's much more heart. And Timothée Chalamet's performance, I was impressed. I haven't always been super impressed by him in everything. I think he's a good actor, but he's always been a little bit subdued, quite often a little bit mumbly in his performances and that. I wasn't sure if I was going to completely buy into his transformation into leading millions as their supposed messiah and all that. He pulls it off. I don't know where all of that performance came from, but I'm like, when the Harkonnens are describing him as a demon and all of this stuff, I'm like, okay, you did it. like that's a combination of direction and editing and all the other skill and everything like that. But he was not some kind of weak link that made it fall apart. I was impressed with everything in this movie. Do I have a couple of things? I wouldn't call them criticisms or even critiques or nitpicks or anything like that, but just thoughts on could some stuff have been done a little different? If there's one thing that I felt didn't quite give me the feeling I would have liked from a Dune movie, is that it felt a little bit small in scope, in that we spend 100% of our time, except for a couple of scenes with the Emperor, we spend almost 100% of the time on Arrakis, on Dune.
Right.
And there wasn't the sense, we were told in part 1 that spice is super important, not just for the visions that people have when they're taking it, but that it is what allows for interplanetary space travel, that without it, interplanetary space travel is impossible. We are told that in a voiceover in part 1. There is no sense of that at all in part 2. And believe me, this is not some kind of this hurts the movie in any way. It was just a thought that occurred to me that it felt a little bit small, because this is supposed to be like an interplanetary dispute that's going on. It's a whole empire.
The whole book happens in Arrakis, though. I mean, for the most part, there's like cutaways. And in fact, the first 2 books almost exclusively happen on Arrakis. You'll have like scenes or little bits of things on other planets. But
and so that's quite accurate here. Yeah. But I sort of wanted I wanted a little sense of why Arrakis is so darn important, and I didn't really get any sense of that in this part too, unto itself. Yeah.
So one of the things I've heard about this movie, and specifically in comparison to the David Lynch Dune movie, is that this movie is more, these movies, are more scientific, if you will. They are more...
I would say grounded. They feel more grounded than the David Lynch version did.
And the Lynch versions are more psychedelic. They explore more of that sense
and
of...
over the top. The exaggeration is definitely there in the David Lynch version.
And I am... it's like you can either go one direction or the other. It's kind of hard to do both.
Sure.
And so they said that the review I watched that sounds a lot like what you're saying. Is basically said that and said, listen, you can choose one. It's kind of hard to do both. This is a choice.
Yes.
And I like it.
Yes.
And the David Lynch one was a choice, and I like that too. They're not the same.
Nothing says you can't watch both and enjoy both.
That's right.
There are compliments to the books, of course. The other thing, and again, this is a absolute choice in the how they chose to tell the story. This is including the Austin Butler character. He's playing who Sting played in the first one, the Fayed. The
Fayed Rotha.
The sort of counterpart to Paul Atreides within the Harkonnens. There's like some allusions to that. And so I just thought, one choice could have been to somewhat parallel their stories in this part 2, the rising of Paul Atreides at the same time that Fayed is rising on the Harkonnen side. That could have been one way to intercut them and have that parallelism going on. They did not choose to do that. What we did is we spent a long span of time with the Fremen and Paul Atreides and just them, and we spent a long time there, to the point that I was kind of like, what is going on with the Harkonnens? They're supposed to be like starting up their spice production again. They're taking back over Arrakis. Like, what's going on with them?
Exactly how the book is, though. It's like,
well, again, that's what I mean. Like, are you going to be completely faithful? Are you going to try to do, so, and then we spend a long time with Fade and the Harkonnens, and to the point that I was like, what's going on with Paul and the Fremen? Like, it felt like there was these long gaps. Again, that's not a criticism. That was a choice that was made. It keeps it very like you can absolutely understand what's going on. If this was Christopher Nolan doing it, it would have been told in a totally different order, with much shorter scenes and all that.
They showed you the end first.
There could have been all kinds of, and he would have intercut some stuff. I have very little doubt, that a different director. So choice, like I say,
a lot of time wondering what people said.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would call any of that a critique, but those are just thoughts that occurred to me. But I mean, this is unequivocal. You got to see this movie. I mean, the other thing is, it's not a colorful movie. You wouldn't expect it to be. You're on Dune. Everything is kind of brown. And so, but tremendous contrast, just oodles and oodles of contrast, and definitely scenes, particularly with the Harkonnens, that is almost entirely black and white, to increase that contrast even more. So yeah, I don't know if this is going to be like show off the vibrant colors of your OLED when we bring it home. That's not what I would use it for. But for contrast, for HDR, it's going to be spectacular. And for the sound, oh my! If this doesn't win an Oscar for the sound, something is wrong here. It's
other people care as much about bass as we do.
No, but still, this is just tremendous. It's tremendous. So go and see it in the biggest format you possibly can. All the people out there with your 2.35 to 1 screens at home, I completely pity your choice even more than I normally do, because that is not the way you want to watch this movie. You want to see it with that additional height if you can at all. So that's my take there. Hugest of thumbs up that I can possibly give to Dune Part 2.
All right. So I got my system back, and I was sick this weekend. So I wasn't super sick. I just kind of relapsed slightly. I don't know what the heck I have. I took 2 COVID tests, and they both came back negative over the course of my illness.
It sounds like the exact same flu that I had, man. It's just spreading around.
I don't know what happened to me, but I've cycled 5 times in the last 4 weeks, which usually I cycle 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah.
So that gives you an indication. I was about once a week I could manage to get myself out there. And yesterday was the first day I really felt normal again. Okay. Like I didn't feel like my energy levels were in the toilet. I still sound pretty congested, but I feel better.
Okay.
So this weekend, like Thursday night and Friday, I felt pretty bad. Saturday, I felt a little bit better, but still pretty bad.
Okay.
Friday night was bad for me. I just didn't sleep and everything else, so I was kind of tired on Saturday. But my wife was out of town because we were all supposed to go to a climbing competition on the other side of the state. Mm-hmm. And I bailed out because I just didn't feel good. So, and my wife didn't want me going with her because they were staying with, we were going to stay with friends, and one of them's going through cancer treatments right now. Has a lower immune system, and I don't need to be anywhere near any of that if I'm feeling sick.
Yeah. So
I stayed home, which means I binge watched the entire season 2 of What If.
Okay. Marvel's What If.
And I remember you talking about it kind of. And my big negative with this, and I'll start with that because I have many more positives. My big negative with this is that like halfway through season 1, they started kind of building up to this conclusion at the end.
Yes.
Which the conclusion on the end of this one was kind of like they sort of started doing it, and then they kind of forgot about it for an episode, and then it came back again, and then it happened, and it was like you didn't need to build this up. This was just a regular episode.
It wasn't quite as big of an ending as season 1. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't love it, to be honest with you. And none of it made a ton of sense. It kind of felt like somebody watched Cabin in the Woods and went, oh, we should just do that.
Okay.
And that's because that's kind of how it went off. It's like, we'll release all the prisoners, and then they'll fight each other.
Yeah.
Which didn't make any sense, because why would they fight each other? They were all prisoners. I mean, why would they start fighting?
They're bad, Tom. They're bad.
But not all of them were. It doesn't make any sense.
Nah.
Anyways, so, but overall, I felt like this season had a little bit more emotional impact for me.
Okay.
Like, I felt like there were more things in this season that made me connect with the characters.
Okay.
I didn't think it was as unique.
Okay.
I didn't think it was as interesting. I thought it was just like, we'll put so-and-so in a different,
That was
we did get to
what I felt. Yeah, they didn't go that far afield with the what if. It was kind of,
it wasn't very
what if
iffy.
it was this character instead of this other character, and that wasn't that gigantic of a change. Yeah.
Yeah. But the one thing it did do, and for those of you that are fans of Captain Carter or Peggy Carter,
yes,
or whatever character you want to call her, wow, I would watch a movie with her in it. I just would.
That's been,
I just would.
Well, she did have a TV series. She had 2 seasons of her own TV series,
which was great.
Watching. Yes.
She is, we talk about this all the time, but when somebody does something well, it's often too easy to think it must be easy because they make it look so easy. Like she carried that series, no problem. Yeah, like not an issue. Like she wasn't even sweating. She was not even it wasn't even a backpack. She was just one of those little handbags that the ladies take to the formal events. She had no problem with that whatsoever. And then I see other people try to carry series. I'm like, oh. That's not working so well. They're not exactly pulling that one off. And boy, I would watch a movie with her in it. Yeah. I would watch a movie with her as Captain Carter in a second. I would love to see that. So I did like What If. Okay. It's short. You know, like I said, I binge watched it in a couple hours, and it was done.
It's like 2 movies.
Yeah. Then I binged watched over the course of 3 days because like 2 episodes a day. Loki season 2. Mm-hmm. Watch the entire thing. Okay. First of all, that man likes to get out of the pools and throw his hair back. That's what I gotta say. This whole throw your hair back thing, they leaned into that.
Oh yes, they did, yes.
Which is fine.
Scarlett Johansson had her, leg outstretched, kneeling down pose, and Tom Hiddleston has his slicking his hair back and throwing it back. Yes.
Really. Really good season. I did like it. I don't think there's any real part of it that I didn't like other than Sylvie. Okay. And it wasn't that I didn't like her. I just felt like she was.
They sidelined her a bit.
And, yeah. I like. It also felt like they. Like when you don't know, but I know when your kid like bumps his head, sometimes you like do stuff with their hair to try to cover it up so it doesn't look like you're abusing your child at home. That was her haircut the entire time, and it was driving me freaking crazy. Like when they flash back to the end of the first season and her hair's parted in the middle and pushed back and kind of permed and looks nice. This is not a why don't you smile more comment. I felt like the design that they gave her was just like, just wearing sweats and for most of it.
I mean, they were trying to make like her. She wanted to be nondescript and not somebody that anybody would take a second look at. She's just trying to blend into the background. So I
just felt like she was wasted in this season. I feel like she's a good actress, actor, and that she is. The character is interesting. I felt like the relationship between her and Loki was interesting, and it was just like,
it was a choice to completely downgrade her importance in the series. Yeah,
right. And now we have Loki, God of Stories, is what he is now called. Right. I had forgotten that was going to happen until it started happening, and I was like, "What is he doing?" And then he sat down on that throne. I was like, "Oh yeah, Loki God of Stories."
Yeah.
And so it's the ending is interesting. I'm not, it kind of, and I like this. They kind of left it so that like we can do literally anything with this character.
That's right.
He can show up anywhere doing anything.
Including
and now
we can just forget about Kang if we want to, because we can kind of hand wave that all away at the end of Loki season 2.
They did mention like in brief, at the very end they mentioned the Ant-Man movie. We were like, there was an incident with one of his variants on 616.
That's right.
616 is of course the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
So very interesting. I liked it. I think it was well done. I felt like it was a little bit tighter of a story. Didn't feel as big, and if I have other than the way how they wasted Sylvie in this one, my other big complaint is the TVA felt. You see how big that place is.
Yes.
Where is everybody?
Yeah.
Like there was never anybody around.
They're off dealing with Deadpool. We're going to find out about that.
I guess so. There's never anybody around. I'm like, where are all these people? It's like you always keep running into the same people in the hallways. There should be more people. Like the first season felt like it was a lot bigger.
Right.
Like the TVA was a lot bigger. Whereas this one it was just like the same 5 people. It's like, okay, I understand the budgets maybe are a little bit tighter this year.
I think it must have been. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like the whole the story was good. Mm-hmm. I think the solutions were interesting. Watching him like grow as a character, I think they did a good job with that. So, obviously it's been around for a while. And yes, no, my next thing I'm going to watch is Ahsoka. So those will be worried about that. I have started watching The Bad Batch with my son.
Okay.
So that's happening as well. All right. How far into the podcast?
Over 30 minutes.
Like
Let's crack on.
All right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Come to our website, find our show notes, our Flickr albums, and older episodes if you would like to catch up on some of the things we've talked about in the past. Me complaining about my room not being fixed. Mostly. I will be adding some room treatments to this room as well, which I have to do, but I'm not. I couldn't wait for that, so I'm not doing that. You can find us at what else?
Facebook, YouTube,
Facebook.com/AVRant, AVRant podcast, right? Yeah, youtube.com/AVRant. Rob, you can email him directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. Let's talk about our listeners of the week. Oh, crap. I didn't check to see if we had
if anybody from PayPal. While you're doing that.
While I'm looking that up, if you want to become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leave us a PayPal donation.
See if
Nobody
anybody
did that
did.
this week. Nobody did.
Nobody did. There we go. Okay, easy.
There you go. Not this week, but maybe next week. We'll see. If you want to support us monthly, you can go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast and sign up to become a monthly contributor to the podcast. Every month, they'll take a little money from you and give most of it to us. We have 130 patrons right now, and we thank every single one of you.
That is for sure. Yeah, once again, that is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 130 patrons over there.
Oh, I almost skipped past this. If you can't support us financially, we understand. Do something to support us, and we'll mention you here. Dean gave me permission to use his photos on avgadgets.com, where I'm the editor-in-chief. If you want to, anything that we talk about over here is fair game for me to write up over there and take full credit for. So I try to put special things to Rob at the bottom of the things, but Rob doesn't really care.
Nope.
And sometimes I forget. So if you hear it here and Rob said it, but it comes out of my mouth over there, believe me, I am crediting Rob in my head. Sometimes I do it on paper.
Yes.
And if anybody says this sounds a lot like Rob in the comments underneath, I will add that to remind myself, so feel free. So thank you, Dean.
Yes, Dean, thank you very much for providing that permission. I haven't even forwarded those over to Tom just yet, but he did include permission.
I was wondering if I missed.
I try not to distract too early in the morning, so I'll have to remember to do that after we finish here. But yes, thank you very much, Dean. Check out avgadgets.com. Tom is editor-in-chief over there. So yeah, wonderful, great articles over there and pictures from some of our AVRant listeners.
That's true. We also got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through all the wars and the political strife that's going on in our country, out of our countries, and around the world. From Parker, Adriano, Jeff, Ryan, Todd, Gurinder, who says he forgot to congratulate us on reaching 900 episodes 2 weeks ago. Here's to another 900. I don't know. His wife still thinks that saying doesn't make sense. Here, well, I agree with her. Anyways, Jorge, who says he's a little late to the party, but he used the exact same words. Here's to another 900. So
yes.
Thank you to all of you for thanking us. Parker, Adriano, Jeff, Ryan, Todd, Gurinder, and Jorge.
Yep, I'll say the names one more time: Parker, Adriano, Jeff, Ryan, Todd, Gurinder, and Jorge. And yes, I mean it's a truncation of the saying, right? It's congratulations on 9 episodes. Here's to 900 more. That would be like the complete phrase.
Yeah.
If we stretched it all out there, I think that. I don't know. That seems like it makes sense. It says you've done this much, and I hope you're able to recreate that and do it again. So there you go. That's the meaning, I would think.
Here's to Dune Part 2.
Congratulations on Dune's Part 1 and 2.
Part 2.
Here's to Dune Part 3.
Here's to 2 more. Here's to 2 more.
Not with Denis Villeneuve at the helm, but so yeah, if this keeps making the kind of money that this looks like it's going to make, they might say, yeah, we're going to keep this series going. There are more books to adapt.
Yeah, but they don't. I don't know how God Emperor Dune is going to go over when it's basically a lady talking to a sentient, ginormous worm walking around. That's all they do is talk. I mean, they just talk. They walk around the garden for a while. They walk around the desert for a while, and then there's a party. I think, if I remember correctly, if I remember the order of events properly, there's a party. It's pretty much the whole freaking movie.
Book.
Well, it would be the movie too.
Right.
It's a lot of talking. I will say the one thing about Loki, if I can just flash back to Loki for a second. The one thing about Loki is they're not afraid in the last episode to have a sit-down conversation about stuff.
That was certainly the case with season 1.
You kind of expect there to be a big action scene at the end, and they're like, "Nah, we're just going to sit around and talk." That's
usually the penultimate episode is when they do the action. The final episode is a bunch of talking. Yeah.
So the whole Kang thing, I understand. I've seen some people say things like, "Oh, it's because of how bad Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, whatever it was called, did." I'm like, it has nothing to do with that, man. It has everything to do with the fact that that movie was they could definitely have made Kang better. It's like that was just a variant. They just get rid of it anyways. In the news, the historic Village Theatre in Westwood, Los Angeles, which I believe I have been to. Okay. I think so. I think I've been there once. Which first opened up in 1931, has been the site of thousands of movie premieres, was put up for sale last year. Director Jason Reitman, up in the air. He's directed more than that.
Oh, yeah, I know, but I'm putting one of the very famous titles in case you're like, who was that? Oh, yeah, that's one of the very famous ones that he did.
Immediately put in a bid to purchase it in order to prevent it from being either demolished or converted into a retail space, as other potential buyers plan to do. To raise funds for the purchase, Reitman reached out to other Hollywood directors, and the response was strong. Now, a coalition of nearly 30 directors, including such names as Rian Johnson and Guillermo del Toro. He picked the two hardest names for me to say. You did that on purpose. And I'm all congested and my mouth is...
It really isn't.
Who were the first to join: Steven Spielberg, Christopher Nolan, J.J. Abrams, Chloe... Was it Zhao? Shao?
I mean, I'm not going to have the correct pronunciation anyway, so something like Zhao.
Zhao? I don't know.
Something
anyway,
close.
I'm sorry, I have mispronounced your name. Yes. It is.
We've mispronounced many around here.
Yeah. Believe me. It's not directed at you specifically. I'm incompetent. James Gunn. See, if you had a name like that, I'd get it right. He might be pronouncing it differently, too.
Yes.
I found out recently somebody's name, like some actor who everybody's been pronouncing their name forever.
There's quite a few of those, yeah.
And many other highly recognizable directors have successfully closed the deal and now are co-owners of the Village Theatre. How could all of those egos in one... How could this possibly go wrong? They are determined to keep the 1,300-seat theater open throughout whatever changes might come, which include big plans to add a restaurant and an art gallery where memorabilia and items from their personal collections can be displayed. Who gets the big display though? Who gets that one?
Maybe
the theater itself will continue to host premieres and first-run movies, but the directors will also work together to supply classic and repertory yes. movies. Okay. Good.
Yeah. Right. So and that's if no one else is going to actually care about the artistry involved, it's going to come down to the artists themselves and the ones who have enough clout and financial backing behind them that they can actually do this. I mean, it's kind of I don't think he actually needed as many directors as ultimately ended up part of this coalition, like purely financially. I think they could have afforded it before they reached. I don't even know what the total number was. I think it's 28 or something like that. But they said more than 24 and fewer than 30. Just the notion that, hey, maybe this is the first of a trend to come, because, Quentin Tarantino, he bought one of those historic theaters that he didn't want to see get shut down. So, this has great meaning to these people. They have the clout and they have the money to do it, not necessarily individually, but if there's becomes a group of them who do this regularly, it could be interesting. We're going to go back to the, individual services, like, Amazon wants to buy a bunch of theaters and just show content that they own, basically. We're going to end up back in that system, because the law that struck down the studios owning theaters, that lapsed or was not re-upped or whatever it was. That was a couple of years ago now. So there doesn't seem to be a legal reason why individual studios can't own theaters again, and groups like this can own theaters.
It felt like there was a Disney theater in Los Angeles that only showed Disney movies. I didn't know that if they were owned by Disney or somehow, but it was only ever Disney movies at that theater. I remember seeing Finding Nemo there when I would live there. So, all right. So we talked about the announcement from Disney, ESPN, Fox Sports, and Warner Brothers Discovery about launching a joint streaming service dedicated to sports. Currently, rumors reported by the Wall Street Journal suggest they are aiming at a $50 per month price point. But almost immediately, they've been sued by Fubo.
Yes.
Fubo has marketed their streaming service as Sports First, but they claim the content providers have required restrictive licensing terms that limit their access and demand they carry many additional non-sports channels. Mm-hmm. The sports packages offered by Fubo and YouTube TV cost more than the rumored $50 a month joint service. So Fubo's lawsuit claims they are violating antitrust laws and either seeks to block the venture or require economic parity so they can license the same content and offer a competitive price to the new service. Okay, fine, great. I think that's a great idea. Do that.
I mean, hey, if it results in lower prices for everybody, I'm not going to complain on the consumer front of things. But not surprising. You have these three massive companies who decide to do this. There wasn't a ton of rumors and stuff before this. This was a fairly surprising announcement. So, I mean, the services that already exist aiming themselves at sports are like, wait, we can't even get a lot of this content. Like, you won't even license it to us. The stuff that you will license to us comes with a bunch of strings attached, and then you're going to undercut us on price too. It's like, yeah, that makes sense that you'd want to. I mean, if you're the CEO of Fubo, you are obligated to try and protect your company. So that makes sense. And yeah, we'll see how that lawsuit pans out. But yeah, if the ultimate end of this, I don't foresee the judgment coming down that these companies just aren't allowed to do this. I mean, there's a little bit more taste for government restriction at the moment, but it seems kind of unlikely to me that that's going to be the decision. But the notion that other competitors are allowed to compete with them on price and access to the content, that would be a good outcome all around, I think.
Yes. Disney and Sony have inked a deal that will see Sony Pictures Home Entertainment completely take over authoring, manufacturing, packaging, distribution, and marketing of all Disney's physical disc releases, DVD, Blu-ray, and Ultra HD Blu-ray moving forward. The first release under the new deal will be 20th Century Studios' The First Omen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is.
It's the most recent in the Omen series.
There's an Omen series? You mean like the little kid?
I mean, going way back. Evil? I don't know if The First Omen actually ties into those original movies or not, but it's all part of that franchise.
So Disney owns The Omen?
Yeah, because they own Fox.
Oh, whatever.
And that came along.
This would most certainly mean job cuts at Disney, but many home theater fans are hopeful this will be better and more consistent quality for the disc releases themselves. Isn't clear. Yet, who decides which catalog titles will get slated for physical releases? And in what seems like surely related news, Disney announced their movie club program is shutting down on May 20th. It has been operating for 23 years, offering discounts and limited edition discs in return for a subscription fee. I did not know that existed. I may have known at some point, but I had forgotten.
Yeah, it was almost a bit like the old what was that for the music, right? I can't remember what it was.
Random House.
Was it that? Was it Random House?
Is that where you get the CDs?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it's called Random House.
It was something or other. Like whatever it was kind of similar to that. You sign up. It used to be done literally via the mail, right? And you would mark down which movies you wanted to get next month. And then the whole trick of it was
Columbia House.
That sounds right. Yeah, there was the whole trick of it where it was if you didn't say that you didn't want next month's movie, then it would automatically get sent to you and you would get charged for it because they have your credit card on file, and there was all those kind of shenanigans that went on. But anyway, there were some releases that there was no other way to get it from Disney other than being part of the Disney Movie Club. There were exclusives to that service. So that's all getting shut down. Disney's just nope, we are out of dealing with physical media. We know there are Disney fans who still want physical media releases. We're just going to let Sony do all of that. So interesting that that's the way it goes. But yeah, in general, Sony's disc releases have been high quality. There are, of course, a few exceptions here and there, but they seem to know what they're doing over there. So let's cross our fingers, but it almost certainly means some people are going to be losing their jobs, because if Disney isn't doing home media anymore, then the people who are working in those fields either get reassigned or let go.
All right, for those of you that are noticing that I'm a little bit weird on the video, or maybe you're hearing some sounds in the background, my trackpad on my laptop decided to stop working.
Right.
It does not work anymore. It's not even in the devices. What I used to do is uninstall it or whatever, or disable it and then re-enable it, and it would start working, or it would, or I would restart my computer, or I'd do a couple things. It's not even showing up anymore. So I have to use a mouse. So you might be hearing some clicking and weird stuff in the background. I'm apologizing for that in advance here. Also, in a few seconds, I'm going to excuse I need to really, I've been kind of blowing my nose. I need to really get in there. So I'm going to excuse myself in a second to go do that.
We're going to hear it in the background.
I'm going to leave the room. That's how bad I plan on it being. Comments from our listeners. Robert heard Bertrand asking about options for importing Ultra HD Blu-rays for titles that have been released in 4K only outside of North America. He recommends www.rarewaves.com. Rare Waves, like the wave of an ocean.
Yes.
He's been really happy with them, and they do ship to both the US and Canada, as well as other countries in the world. He thinks their shipping charges are reasonable, and while you'll often find their listings selling through Amazon, if you order directly from their website, they offer a rewards program that can bring down the price down a bit if you import items fairly frequently. They offer a lot more than just discs too. So whatever you're looking to import, they might be worth checking out. Like, what else do they do?
Music, toys, books,
like collectibles and stuff like that. Okay.
All kinds of stuff that you might want to import from elsewhere in the world. So yeah, in general, if I just go to Amazon.ca here in Canada and I look up a Ultra HD Blu-ray that is, only available in France, or only available in UK, or only available in Japan, or something like that, Rarewaves will very often be the, sold by, and it'll be Rarewaves -CA for the Canadian version. So it is quite often the case that they're using Amazon as a storefront, and that is actually the company behind it. But yes, if you actually go directly through their website, you can be part of their rewards program. So if you do it on a fairly regular basis. Also, it seems as though they sort of have the price that you would get including shipping through rarewaves.com if you go directly there, and then they add another like $5 in shipping on Amazon to kind of cover the additional costs they have to pay to Amazon for using them as their storefront. So you can usually save, $4, $5, $6 if you go directly to their website, and you could join their rewards program. So again, it's not going to be like some massive difference in price versus what you would find searching Amazon, but it's a little bit cheaper, and if you do it regularly, it could be worth it doing directly through their website. So thank you, Robert, for that suggestion.
All right, scroll down. Carl heard our discussions recently about the delay via streaming services when watching live sports, and how, for the Super Bowl specifically, Paramount Plus was measured as having the least delay, but it was still about 20 to 25 seconds more than using an over-the-air antenna. He wanted to mention that watching the game via antenna and the next-gen TV broadcast also held a major advantage in image and sound quality. He had a Zapperbox and their Zapperbox antenna installed in his attic shortly before the Super Bowl. It's a single tuner version for $250, or a dual tuner for $275, which is what Karl got. As long as you keep it connected to the internet, it can handle the DRM copy protection that's present on some next-gen TV stations, but you cannot record those DRM protected channels. Excuse me again. God, I'm a mess. Non-DRM protected channels can be recorded if you add your own USB hard drive. He switched back and forth from OTA to Paramount Plus during the game, and it was easy to see the difference. That's not surprising. Furthermore, probably just due to the sheer amount of internet traffic, the Paramount Plus stream pixelated a few times, but the OTA broadcast was rock solid for him. He never saw a single error, which is also not surprising. The only time you're going to see an error in over the air is if something interferes with physically interferes with your antenna or your signal. At my brother-in-law's house, when we were watching whatever game it was, every time somebody opened the door, the antenna was taped to this glass above the door to the backyard. And every time somebody opened the door to the backyard, it would shake and it would mess up the stream. So the UHD over the UHD channels are predominantly broadcasting in 1080p, it seems. He's getting 2 channels in 4K resolution. Some of the stations even broadcast some content with Dolby Atmos audio. And then there are all the 1080i and 720p HD channels. Still in total, that pulls 67 stations, although several of those are shopping channels, public access, or foreign language. He also pays for the 14-day guide data. Only 24-hour guide is free. So if you whatever, which lets him schedule recordings as well. All in all, he's very pleased with the setup. So there you go.
Yeah. Recommendation for Zapperbox there from Karl. But yeah, over the air is going to be the actually the best quality. Ironically, the oldest technology is still the best quality.
Infinite Gary. So Rob doesn't think we'll all have all of our sports being shot and broadcast in 4K to 2035, huh? Guess we'll have to keep the podcast going until episode 1. Oh, I'm sorry. Episode 1500. So
Yes.
I saw it threw me off, the comma.
The comma.
Episode 1500, so we can tune in to find out. Yeah, we'll have to find out. All right.
I mean, he watches a lot more.
We're going to need a sponsor or two, I think.
Broadcast sports. Yeah. There you go. We'll have to figure out the numbering convention and all that if we make it to 1500.
Kiran, there's some questions here. Kiran in India. Kiran, I like that name. Kiran used to have a pair of Wharfdale Tower speakers without making any other changes to a room. He decided he wanted to use an on-wall speaker setup instead, and he wound up going with Yamo's THX Select 2 certified D500 model for left, center, and right. Mm-hmm. And they are rectangular, thin, or not deep. So rectangular speakers that have 2 woofers on the sides and then a Diapolito array in the center. So when I say size,
mid.
Mid, tweeter, mid in the middle, and then flanking those are 2 woofers. I keep forgetting my stupid trackpad doesn't work. I need a new computer, or I need this one to get fixed. Yes. He's come across some explanations from experts that he trusts about. You mean other than us?
Yes, other than us, Tom.
Don't exist. How on-wall speakers can be a compromise in terms of mid-range and vocals, specifically.
Yep.
Because there's no avoiding the reflections from the wall on which the speakers are mounted. The speaker boundary interference will supposedly always compromise the sound quality of on-wall speakers unless you go to the extent of turning your front wall into a full-on baffle wall with lots and lots of acoustic treatment, which Kiran has not done. The thing is, he's found these Yamo on-wall speakers sound better to him, particularly when it comes to vocals, than his old Wharfdale Towers. Oh my God. Are you going to tell me that your personal experience trumps something some rando on the internet said? How could that be? How could it be? So how big is the compromise to the mid-range and vocals of on-wall speakers in reality? I think you can answer that question. If he were to go to the trouble and expense of turning his whole front wall into a baffle wall, would it sound 1,000,000 times better? No, it won't.
No, not 1,000,000 times better. That
will it sound better?
Be pretty confident, yeah. But yeah, there are improvements that can be had, sure.
So, okay, remember, sound waves are like dropping a pebble into water. Right? So they extend out in multiple directions. Yes. Now, the bass waves are omnidirectional. They extend out into all directions, and the treble tends to be more directional, meaning that they don't quite extend very far.
I mean, another way to think of it is just that the high frequency waves are just more easily disrupted. You put anything around them, you put anything in their path, and they get disrupted quite easily. Whereas very long bass sound waves, it's not that they don't run into the same obstructions. It's not that they are 100% unaffected, but it's just that they're so long and the wavelengths are so large that they sort of wrap around whatever they might come in contact with. So in the end, if you sort of like zoom out, like if you were to rise above the pond that you're dropping the pebbles into and you're looking at the waves that are forming, you would just visually see a lot more disruption at the very high frequencies. The bass frequencies would look like just concentric circles coming out from the source of the sound, more or less, with only very small little interruptions with them as they just sort of wrap around any obstructions that there might be. So,
speaker design, if you like find yourself on a speaker designer or a creator's forum, talking when you read them or hear them, if it's maybe an actual in-person conversation, talking about the baffle design.
Yes,
I mean, it is intricate. There's a lot going on that they will talk about that will affect how the different drivers and the sounds interact with the front baffle of the speaker.
Yeah.
Okay. But remember this. It's not like it's a surprise to anybody that you put your on-wall speaker on a frickin' wall.
Indeed.
So when they designed the speaker, I know this is going to come as a shock to you. They thought, yeah, he's probably going to put it on the wall, so we should maybe take that into account when we are designing our speaker.
I mean, that said, this is a bit of a one size does not fit all when it comes to what you heard, the explanation, because we have absolutely seen on-wall speakers that are just a two-way design. It's just a tweeter and a woofer. That woofer is playing down as low in the bass as it's able to, and the front face of that two-way on-wall speaker just looks like the front face of any other bookshelf speaker. It's fairly narrow. There's nothing particularly, drastic about its design, except that from front to back, it's maybe 4.5 or 5 inches deep, and it's mounted right on the wall. And when that type of speaker plays down into the bass, there will be boundary interference. It is unavoidable. It is a physical certainty that that is going to happen. So when you see a design like what Yamaha has done with their speakers, it's got like a bigger face than a lot of just stand mount or bookshelf speakers.
And when I say rectangular for this, for those of you that aren't looking at the pictures on YouTube or following along on our Flickr album, which you should be, it's not rectangular like a bookshelf speaker, meaning higher than wide. It is wider than it is tall.
That's right.
So it is you would call it a strange looking speaker if it was
just sitting on a bookshelf somewhere. It would seem squat and it would seem extra wide and all that type of stuff. Now, one of the things that's going on there is this basically has its own flat front baffle in place for the tweeter. The frequencies coming out of the tweeter are going to have a difficult time wrapping around the face of this speaker and interacting with the wall behind them. In addition to that, if you give it a fairly high frequency and steep crossover, you're going to have very, very little in the way of the tweeter of a speaker with a face like this that is actually reaching the wall behind it. I mean, there will be a little bit. You can still measure these things, but they've basically physically controlled the dispersion of this tweeter by just having a big old face on it. Now, there's going to be a slight drawback to that in that you'll have diffraction off the edges of that face. When the sound waves that are basically propagating along the face of this speaker reach the edge of the speaker, they're going to form like little eddies in a pool, right? Like just like you do when a stream of water comes in contact with a long flat face, you end up with this turbulence at the edges. Now, they've rounded the edges of this speaker. That mitigates those eddies a little bit, and they've put in this Dapolito array of a mid-range driver above and below that tweeter to control the vertical dispersion. There's going to be some hopefully designed and controlled sound wave interaction, at least in the vertical direction, and then also in the horizontal, because the two woofers are placed to the sides of this tweeter. So what they've sort of done is like contained and directed the way that the treble frequencies and all the consonant sounds in your dialogue and everything like that get, forced out into the room, with very little of that sound having an opportunity to come back and interact with the wall behind it. Now, if you didn't have any of that, if you just had a narrow face, you didn't have this driver arrangement, you had a low crossover frequency on the tweeter, I'd say, there's an opportunity there for some of that, particularly in the transition at the low end of the tweeter to the high end of the mid-range, or the single woofer in a two-way design with a thin front baffle like you'd see on any other speaker. It's like, there's an opportunity there for there to be difficulty in controlling exactly what's reflecting off of the back wall. In the mid-range there, I'm going to assume that Yamo knows this design and actually has those mid-range drivers crossing over to those bass woofers at maybe a little bit of a higher frequency than you might anticipate. Other designs, three-way designs like this, you might think those mid-range drivers would play as low as they're able to. In a design like this for the on-wall, it might be the opposite. They might have given it a higher crossover frequency, again, to use that physical front face and the arrangement of these drivers to control how much of that lower frequency coming out of those mid-range drivers actually has the physical opportunity to wrap around and act off the wall behind it. Now, again, it's unavoidable. There's going to be some, but there are certainly things you can do in the driver design, in the crossover design, and in the baffle design of the speaker itself.
Crossover frequencies are 400 hertz and 2500 hertz.
Yeah, so again, like we often expect like a 300 or a 250 from mid-range to woofers, so they've gone a little bit higher. What a guess on my part, but Yamo's not a stupid company that doesn't know how to think about what's going to happen when you mount a speaker on a wall. So all of that is to say, it is a physical factor. The person who is saying that if you just take a simple two-way on-wall speaker and mount it on your wall, there's an opportunity there for there to be speaker boundary effects that if you put some absorption around that speaker and sort of create the THX baffle wall, which is like everything other than the speaker's absorption on your front wall, which is, just mitigating all of that boundary interference that can happen there. If you don't do any of that, you can run into issues where, because the speaker is not very deep, it's going to be at a higher frequency, where you start getting, it's just the perfect distance from the front face of the speaker, moving backwards to the wall behind it, reflecting off that wall and coming back forward, that it interferes with the sound that's still trying to come out the front of that speaker. That's going to happen at a higher frequency when the speaker itself is physically thinner. Versus if you had a much deeper speaker or moved the speaker farther away from the wall, that would lower the frequency just due to the wavelength, right? The physical distance from the front of the speaker to the wall behind it. When that distance gets greater and greater, the frequency at which you get the worst sort of interference gets lower and lower. It's going to get higher and higher as the speaker gets closer to the wall and the speaker itself gets thinner and the front face gets closer to that wall. You're going to get higher frequency interference. But if you do the design properly, like Yamo has done here, you can mitigate a lot of that.
Right. I mean, this is another example, too, of a speaker that isn't conventionally going to sell like to normal people.
Yeah.
Like, normal people are going to look at this speaker and go, that's weird. I'm not buying that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand that speaker. So this is a speaker that is designed, and it's almost like when you go to a restaurant and you see something on the menu that sounds awful. Mm-hmm. You're like, that must be good. It must be. Nobody would put this on the menu,
right,
and have it be bad.
To appeal just from the word description of it.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw trotters, which is pig's feet, on the menu. I was like, I'm eating it. I have no idea. I've never had it before. I didn't know what it was going to be. Came out, it was delicious. It wasn't just, pig's feet in a broth. It was something. It was, a terrine or whatever it was. But this is another example of that. This is a speaker that's designed to sound good. Mm-hmm. And to be surprised that it does, they didn't make it to look good. They made it to sound good. They didn't make it to appeal to the widest number of people. They made it to sound good. And that's what you see with a speaker like this. Now, a lot of times, like Rob said, the theoretical, the advice that people give out there that exists, the reason why this podcast is different than the rest of those is because they're very rarely talking about a specific product.
Sure.
Like, we talk about specific products all the time because people are saying, this is my speaker, how come it doesn't sound good? This is my speaker, how come it does sound good, as it is in your case? And the general advice, the best practices advice, if you will, oftentimes is true, but not always true. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're coming to here. Yes, boundary reinforcement is a problem and can be for on-wall speakers. But these speaker designers, if you're just buying like the world's cheapest on-wall speakers,
right,
you should expect that there's going to be some issues with them. That's the way, but you expected that anyways, right? No one was, you shouldn't be surprised. That's what you got. But when you spend a little bit more and you get a speaker that looks a little bit different and purpose-built like this, you shouldn't be surprised that they are smart enough to go, hey, guess what? There's some boundary reinforcement here that we need to deal with. So Kiran is interested in the financial side of the home theater business. He has looked at the quarterly and yearly financial reports of most TV manufacturers, and they typically list their costs of goods sold and declare their annual profits in terms of net of goods sold. He's tried to find similar financial reporting for speaker companies, but hasn't come across the same relatively straightforward types of figures. Do we have any insight as to why? Since Tom has been me, I have been a reviewer for so long, he's curious if I have been privy to information about which home theater products are the most profitable and which make the most margin. Can we share that information? Speaker profits. I don't know that I could tell you which speaker's profit makes the most money, or they call points or whatever they call it. But it is a selling point when you're at CES or CEDIA, right, and a speaker manufacturer is displaying their products. That is part of their marketing thing. We have 50 points on this, which means that your cost will be 1/2 or 50% of what the MSRP is of this. And that means that you could sell it at a 25% discount and still to make a 25% profit.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So I think it's like an inverse bell curve. Like the really cheap speakers make huge profits. I think they spend almost no money on those things. Right. I remember seeing some speakers that looked really cool. They were cool looking speakers, had an interesting design, bunch of drivers in them, and the MSRP was like I don't know, $1,000 or $1,200 they were like a tower speaker, and they were 50 or 60 points on those, meaning that the dealer was only paying 50 or 40% of the MSRP at the dealer cost, and they were. I mentioned it to somebody, and he literally ran away from me to go find these speakers. So that's how, so 50 points, 60 points, that's insanely good. So you should expect that the dealer price for most of the speakers are above that because, this person in particular, who was a dealer or an installer, I think.
Yeah.
He was like, I need to find these.
Yeah.
If I'm this is many years ago, if I'm remembering correctly. It could have been
certainly
even more.
In-wall and in-ceiling speakers, out of speakers, they tend to be one of the highest margin items. Because, look, they don't have a cabinet, and a lot of the cost of a speaker is the cabinet. If you're really just having a plastic frame with a naked driver in there, there's a lot of margin built into that.
So when we talk about this kind of like point of diminishing returns in speakers, so $500 to $1,000, maybe $1,200 for bookshelf speakers, and $1,000 to $2,000 for floor standing speakers, in that range. It's kind of where we say that's like you get a really good product and you're getting more for your money as you're getting into this range, right? I think it's the least profitable for the manufacturers. I think they're scraping by on those things to a certain extent, compared to the really, really cheap stuff and the really, really expensive stuff, which I think the really, really expensive stuff is, they make insane amounts of money on them because I don't think they cost that much. And also not much more to make.
With speakers, like why it isn't so easy to find it is because we almost have this stratification or this sort of like binary system with speakers these days where it's like, it's either very small companies that aren't publicly traded, so they aren't really obligated to disclose their financials in an easily publicly accessible way, or they're part of some gigantic conglomerate company where they aren't necessarily going to break out exactly what the speakers made. It's going to be like a subdivision of some gigantic umbrella company, right? So it's difficult to suss out exactly what speakers are making in particular.
Like JBL is a Harman company,
which is part of Samsung,
which
right?
is, so it's you're gonna they may be internally reporting
that's right,
that sort of thing, but the company as a whole, like I remember my dad worked for a company that made brake shoes for trains, and that division, which of a huge company, that division was like 90% of the profits for the company.
Sure.
For the whole company, because brake shoes for trains are insanely cheap to make, and you can sell them for whatever you want, because what are they going to do, not buy them?
That's right.
So they made insane amounts of money for the company, but the company itself never reported specifically on what his division made. They report on the entire thing.
Yeah, you'll find the whole company. And then, like, if we're going outside, because he was just saying, like, what types of home theater products, aside from speakers, like, not just within speakers, which are the most profitable, but types of products overall, is like speakers are fairly high up there, because it is quite common that the cost to manufacture, it's sold at double that price to the distributors, and then the distributors sell it at double the price to the retailers, and the retailers sell it at double the price to you. That's pretty common with speakers, whereas like televisions, the groups like TCL who make televisions, they make like $1 per TV that they sell. It is definitely not the most profitable. Would be like televisions or DVD players, where it's like less than $1 per DVD player in terms of profit for the manufacturer. But like accessories are almost always the most profitable thing, because they're a piece of plastic that costs less than a penny to make, and they sell it for $40-$50. The tremendous margin built in there. Again, it's not the most expensive thing, but in terms of margin, accessories are almost way up there. And then headphones are the other one, right? It's like headphones are $125 to make, and it's $250 when you buy it. So yeah.
And apparently for $50 you can get headphones.
That's right.
The rest of your natural life. Cannot kill these things.
Indeed.
I don't think I'm ever getting them to 50%. I have to review I have like a box of review products that just came in, and 2 headphones are in there, and I've got to deal with these, and I don't know how I'm going to, these headphones, I may never charge them. How it goes.
Could happen.
David says he's been listening to AVRant for several years now. He noticed that we seem to have an extreme dislike for AudioQuest, Rob in particular. I don't think that Rob has any more of a dislike than I do, but fair enough, he might be more vocal about it. And AudioQuest speaker wires in particular. He's gotten the feeling that something happened between us and AudioQuest prior to when he started listening to us, but he's never noted any specifics or details. They touched me in an appropriate place. I'm sorry. I'll show you on the doll.
And I asked them out, and they said no.
Yes, that's right. Clearly. Clearly, Rob's the jilted lover in this situation.
That's gotta be it. Why?
Back when he was just starting to get into audio, he bought some equipment from a local hi-fi shop. This is over 20 years ago now, and at the time, they sold him some AudioQuest Type 2 spread spectrum hyperlitz speaker wires for his front three
speakers. They charge you by the word, by the letter.
The more words it has in it, the more expensive it is.
Must be.
Davis never claimed to hear any difference, but they weren't too expensive back then. I wonder what that means exactly. Compared to what? And they seem like a nice upgrade over bulk speaker wire, and they've never given him any problems. So what draws our ire so much about AudioQuest speaker wires, or AudioQuest, the company in general? He doesn't have any allegiance to them. So are their wires like actually hurting the signal? Is there an objective performance-based reason for our dislike? Because if that's the case, he'll be fine with getting rid of them and buying something else. But if they perform just fine, why spend the money to replace them, right? So the problem with high-end speaker wire manufacturers is that you are literally paying for marketing. That's all that you're doing. The best case scenario with speaker wire is that it does nothing. It just sends the signal through while doing nothing to the signal.
Right.
That is the best case.
Which is objectively impossible to do literally nothing to the signal, but some get very, very close. Certainly nothing that you could ever perceive with your human ears. Yeah.
So bulk speaker wire, the cheap stuff, like zip cord, the lamp cord we used to use all the time back in the day, does the same thing. It is absolutely fine for almost all applications in home theater. I literally am throwing away right now because when I went looking for a speaker cable to connect, because my other one broke, it's probably just a bad connection, but I'm gonna throw it away anyways. Bad connection at the banana plugs, and I'm gonna take the banana plugs off and then throw the cable away because I'm not gonna worry about it. When I went through the box, I have reams of zip cord, lamp cord that I bought before I ever got into this. This is when I was getting my very first system. I bought like 250 feet of it or something like that. Yeah. I still have it, and it works just fine. It works just fine.
Absolutely.
The problem with AudioQuest and AudioQuest is sort of like, for us at least, a moniker. It's sort of like an umbrella term for all of these companies that are essentially selling marketing. They say this is a better speaker wire than this other speaker wire, which is...
And this was Monster Cable back in the day. We hated them just as much too.
Yeah, and then MIT, there was MIT cable and a bunch of other ones that were
cable,
which is actually
cable. Transparent. I want to bring up specifically because, I mean, to answer the question of, like, you already own a bunch of AudioQuest speaker wire, you bought it 20 years ago, do you need to run out and replace it with something new, even if the new stuff is not very expensive? No. The AudioQuest wire that you're using is doing its job just fine. It's not, objectively speaking, it's doing some kind of degradation to the speaker, but not particularly any worse than anybody else's. It's not something that you need to run out in place. That's not the thing. Transparent, with their like inline batteries and stuff, does actual like quite measurable and could be argued noticeable harm to this signal that's going on there. So that's one that's even more expensive in many cases than AudioQuest, where there really is signal degradation going on because they are actively doing what they can to create a bad speaker wire and then trying to market it as somehow being a better speaker wire. But I mean, ultimately, where most of my dislike for AudioQuest comes from is just that they are charging a pile of money for something that absolutely does not make the signal any better. They get away with it somehow. Like, I don't know why the truth in advertising doesn't really kick in, but it's because, people don't understand, I don't know, basic electronics, I guess. It's a weird thing how they can even really get away with some of the claims that they make in their marketing. But I just have a low tolerance for utter BS in this hobby. I don't like seeing people needlessly spending money or being convinced by marketing to spend lots and lots more money than they need to, not getting what is promised to them by the marketing, and then going into an echo chamber with other people who also got duped and perpetuating this on other people who are coming into the hobby. So it's just a low tolerance for that kind of BS. I got upset. I'm going to link to an Audioholics article from years and years ago. This is one of the things that Gene Delasella got started early, was calling out this BS in these speaker wire marketing claims and backing that up with objective measurements of like, here's what's happening to the signal, and this zip cord is doing as good or a better job than your hundreds or thousands of dollars speaker wire.
We'd already seen that beforehand too,
Sure,
where
sure.
there would have been like listening tests, and they had put like regular lamp cord inside of like a garden hose, and made it look fancy, and then people thought they heard a difference, and they really hadn't.
But I got upset at Gene too when he was taking money for advertising, which is how the business over at Audioholics works. That's fine. You're running advertising on a website. That's understandable. But when they got in bed with Kimber Cable and then started these reviews saying that Kimber Cable was like worth the money, I was like, no, I had a very low tolerance for that BS too. So, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, I'm getting a little bit miffed at SVS these days because I really don't like the marketing they're putting on those, by-wire speaker wires and that. It's certainly nowhere near as bad as marketing I've seen elsewhere. It's not like I'm going to, disavow SVS because of that, but I'm a little bit miffed at it. And that's
the same
a
thing
personal
with me and the super tweeters over at
AVRant
Audio.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's just a low tolerance for that kind of BS. That's all.
We will not ever promote a product that we don't think scientifically makes a difference. And if we think it doesn't scientifically make a difference, we will tell you, you can buy this. You may hear a difference, but it's
going to be psychoacoustic.
That's in your head. Yeah. It's not actual difference. So that's what it comes down to.
That's all it was.
We don't necessarily hate. I mean, there are some audio cables out there. MIT used to make one that had like a battery in it, and
Transparent does that. I just mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah. These will make a negative effect. It becomes an EQ.
Yep.
And there's no reason to even consider anything other than regular old speaker cable unless you want something that looks better. And if you buy it for that reason, that's fine. There's lots of reasons to buy things that look better but don't perform better. How many times I'm not a car guy. I don't know much about cars, which is funny because I need to buy one. But I know there's guys and gals out there who know a lot about cars who can say this car versus this car. The cheaper one that looks not as good is better. Objectively, in almost every single way, that is better than this more expensive
or particularly
one.
If you limit to one metric, like which one just accelerates better.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily going to be the faster looking and more expensive car.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is true in a lot of things. There's still reasons to buy that other one, status and everything else.
Yeah.
But if you got your speaker cables lying on the ground like I do in here, it would be nice to have better looking ones than the ones I do. I have some nice ones and I have some not so nice
Dress them up.
And that's the way it is. Adriano in Australia. Adriano has a dead-end X4100W receiver, has 7 amps built in but can process 9 speakers max. He's already using a pair of in-ceiling Speakercraft speakers as his surround speakers to either side of his seats. Now he wants to add another pair of in-ceiling Speakercraft speakers as a pair of Atmos overheads.
Mm-hmm.
All of the devices out there, including from Dolby themselves, said that if you only have a single pair of overhead Atmos speakers, the best option is to make them top middles. But that will mean he has his pair of in-ceiling surround speakers positioned either side of the seats above him, and another pair of in-ceiling speakers in close proximity as top middles. So are top middles actually his best option, or would you say top fronts be a better choice in this scenario? None. Unfortunately, is my suggestion to you. I know you want to add more speakers in here, but so the speakers that your surround speakers, which are placed as top middles, because that's where they are.
Pretty darn close, yes.
Yeah. Your surround speakers are in the way, if you will, of everything, every other speaker.
Very nearly co-located to where top middles would go.
Well, and even if you wanted to add something else, I don't know. You could maybe add surround backs, I guess, put them way behind you and try to add surround backs.
Add on-wall surround speakers on the walls beside you, down close to ear level, but he says that he can't. And that's fair enough.
They can't.
Gotta live in the real world.
So if you add top fronts, which you could,
yes,
which would be the other option. If you add front heights, I guess technically is what you would, you'd have to call them.
No, it could be top fronts too,
top fronts and top middles, a lot of times you can't do.
No, but he's not. He's only doing one pair of
surrounds,
overheads.
Right.
He's got surrounds and then one pair of overheads. They could be top
right,
fronts.
right.
Yeah.
Either way, I would expect you to notice almost no difference in the sound that you hear, unless your other speakers are like on the frickin' ground, like very.
But
very
I mean, the
close to
Atmos
the
speakers will, the Atmos logo will light up on the front of his AV receiver, and there's all that stuff. So yeah, if you're going to do it, have some physical separation between your existing in-ceiling speakers, which you're using as surrounds right now. You want to have like at least 5 feet of separation between them. And you're not going to have that if you put them where top middles show up in all the diagrams. They're going to be like a foot or 2 away. So yeah, you could accomplish that by installing them where in the diagrams you're seeing top fronts. And that's a totally reasonable way to do it. To do a 5.1.2 system where your 0.2 at the end there, your overhead speakers are top fronts, totally reasonable way to do it. And that's what I'd suggest in this situation.
All right. I think you should sit with 5 point whatever. So he's in need of 2 channels of external amplification to power his new pair of overhead speakers. He'd like the cheapest but still good amp that he can get readily in Australia. See, that was the problem right there. Just one caveat, however. He is power conscious, so he wants the 2-channel amp to power down along with the rest of the system, but he doesn't want to have to manually power it on and off. If it works with a remote control, he uses a Harmony hub and the Harmony iPhone app, so he'd want it to work with that or just automatically sense the power on and off. So I have an article on AV Gadgets about this, but it is probably
US-centric.
You'll have to look to see whether or not it works with your... You'll have to search Amazon Australia to see whether or not you can get it. But the Fosse options are on there. There's a couple of other ones. And what you're looking for really is a 12-volt trigger if you can find it. The 12-volt trigger will allow you to turn... The amp will turn on and off with the receiver. I will say that most of these amps are going to be Class D anyways. They use very little... They draw very little power when they're on, and not that much less power when they're off.
It still is a difference, though. When they're sitting there idle doing nothing, they still are drawing more power than if they are fully switched off. So, I mean, the Fosse that we typically point to, and it's actually, like, just if we're going straight conversion, a better deal in Australia than it is, like, here in Canada or in the US. Fosse's TDA 7498E, which is a remarkably powerful little 2-channel Class D amplifier. It's like a genuine 80 watts per channel. Nothing dinky about it at all. But it is a very simple design where it is just a toggle switch on and off, doesn't have a trigger, doesn't have signal sensing, doesn't have a remote control, just has your regular RCA ins and a pair of speaker binding posts, and that's it. So manually it's very easy to toggle on and off, but if you really don't want to do that, one solution, since it is only 90 Australian dollars and you are not going to find something as good for less money than that. Like, I can pretty much promise you that Fosse TDA 7498E from Amazon Australia is 90 Australian dollars, and that's a terrific deal for a very good little 2-channel amp. And honestly, with the money that you saved on that, I could see buying like a smart switch that works with your Harmony hub. And, this is not drawing so much power that you couldn't plug it into a 10 amp limited smart switch. It's going to be perfectly fine with that. It isn't like a multi-1,000 watt subwoofer amplifier or something like that. So I could see spending a little money on a smart switch and controlling things that way. That's one way you could get away with doing that. There's an alternative, because I mean, prices again in Australia are kind of all over the place and often very much higher than what we get here in North America. So SMSL, which is another one of those Chinese amplifier brands, but they have a good model, the AD18. The form factor on that is a little bit different because it sort of stands vertically, but that's selling for 187 Australian dollars, so basically twice the price. But what this one does have is just a remote control that it comes with, along with like digital inputs in addition to its auxiliary input, but it just comes with a remote control. So I mean, you can program your Harmony remote to just infrared control this like its own remote does, and that would totally work. I will mention that since you're going to be using pre-outs from your receiver going into this external amplifier, it does not have the red and white RCA jacks. It has a stereo 3.5 millimeter auxiliary jack on the back.
So
they don't
cable.
They don't mention SMSL doesn't mention including the 3.5 millimeter to RCA cable. Some amplifiers include that, but they don't mention including that. So, I mean, you can just get an Amazon Basics, 3.5 millimeter to RCA adapter cable that costs, $10, and you're off to the races with everything that you need there. So those are a couple of solutions that could absolutely work. Yeah, for very reasonable prices.
So I have linked up my article about external amplification and with recommendations, and the Fosse one that he recommended is on there.
Yep,
so,
I'm sure it is.
The other thing I will link up is a solution to power on 2 devices at once.
Okay.
And I this is mostly for subwoofers. But what this is a master slave. I don't know that that's the right term anymore, but anyways, that's what they call it. Switch.
Yeah, power outlet.
So basically, you attach this to your power outlet, and then you plug in your receiver into one, and into
the master part of it.
Yeah, and then the amp into the second part of it.
Yeah,
the slave part of it or whatever. And these are used mostly is for power tools
or computers.
So you have a power
it's very
tool
often
going
used for computers. And,
yeah. So the power tools, because they'll be labeled like tool and then vac. So
right.
the tool is the master and the vac is the other one.
Yeah.
And so that when you turn on the tool powers up, and then the vacuum cleaner powers up.
Has a hard power toggle switch just like that Fosse amp does. It's always left in the on position, and then it's just responding to the controlled electrical outlet. So that's another way to do it. Yeah.
So there's a couple of different
that could work for the Fosse in this case. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. He says, if the external amp has its own volume control, how do you determine where to set that prior to running Odyssey, or does it not matter? So the way I did it with mine, because I have volume control on my amp, and the easiest way to do it is just to, plug your speakers in without doing anything else. Turn on the amp.
That's right.
Without doing anything else. Turn the volume all the way up to max.
Yeah.
Okay. And then go sit in your seat, and do you hear any noise? And if you do not hear any noise, then go up to the speaker and see if you hear any noise, any hiss.
It'll be like a little, soft hiss, usually coming from the tweeter. That's the most typical.
And if that bothers you, then if you don't hear it from your seat, you can pretty much stop right there. But if that little hiss bothers you, knowing that it is hissing even though you can't hear it from your seat, you lower the volume on your amplifier until you don't hear the hiss.
And I mean, don't try to go for dead silence with your ear pressed against the tweeter, because that's unreasonable. Your AV receiver isn't going to do that. Even a very good external amplifier isn't going to be dead silent with your ear pressed against the tweeter. But you should be able to get to where you don't hear that idle hiss from your seat. Right, you sitting in your normal seat or the seat that is closest to the speaker that you're testing. Go ahead and sit there, and if you don't hear the hiss there, then that is good enough. You want to basically keep the volume dial on that external amp as high as you can. But that might not be literally as high as it goes, because very often there actually is like a little bit of plus gain that's available there, and that'll make that hiss noticeably louder. So it's usually you turn that volume dial as high as it possibly goes, and then just back it down just a little bit is very common. That's all you need to do. And as long as you can't hear that idle hiss from the seat that is closest to that speaker, then that's where you leave it, and then you go ahead and run Odyssey, and it can set its trim levels appropriately there, and then never, ever touch that volume dial again.
Yes. Yeah. That's the key. Henry asks, in general, how strict are the landlords in Florida? I guess he's asking me.
I would think so. I've never lived there.
He's going to be moving from New York to Florida next year. He's been renting an apartment in New York for quite a few years now. That landlord was cool. He let him paint a room dark, ceiling mount a projector, hang a fixed projection screen on the front wall, and mount his speakers. As long as Henry patches the small mounting holes and repaints the room back to what it was when he moved in, it's all good. Can he reasonably expect a similar attitude in Florida? Does he need to start figuring out how he's going to deploy his home theater setup without putting any holes or marks in the walls of the ceiling? Man, right now, the housing market in Florida is not great. I'll be honest with you. A lot of people... everything is really expensive, and no one really knows why, but a lot of people think it's because of investments and investors and stuff like that are kind of ruining the market here. I would be surprised if... Now, I have not rented here since I lived in Jacksonville when we first moved here. We lived in an apartment for 6 months or maybe even a year. I would not call them cool. I wouldn't call them not cool, but I would not call them cool in the same way. But I would venture to say, if you asked all your friends in New York if their landlords are cool, not all of them are going to come back going, of course, I can do whatever I want. You know what I mean?
Definitely a case-by-case basis here going on, for sure.
But I would expect that however cool they may or may not be in New York, I would expect them to be less cool here, because the pricing here is kind of out of control, and they are kicking people out left and right from what I can sense. So I I don't have any firsthand knowledge. I do see, because I'm a member of a couple of Facebook groups that are like, not Florida, but my area specific. And it doesn't seem like people are having very great things to say.
Okay.
I do know that there's a couple of companies here that have bought tons of houses and apartments or condos and stuff around here that rent them out, that they're like, I don't even know how to say fascist when it comes to getting, like your contract. So be very, very careful what contract you sign, because a lot of the contracts around here are, it doesn't matter what happens. You're due for, like if the house burns to the ground and it's not your fault.
Okay.
Like it's struck by lightning or something like that. The house burns to the ground the first month you're there and you signed a 12-month lease, you're paying for 12 months.
Yes, right. Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
And because of the flooding in the area that happened, because, we talked about that, I know that in my neighborhood, there's a company that owns a couple of houses around here, and their houses got destroyed, basically. Yeah. Feet and feet of water in there. And the people who were living there, they didn't have insurance or whatever, or didn't have renter's insurance, or maybe they didn't have flood insurance. Well, I'm sure they didn't. And they had to move out and pay for a new place and still pay rent for that place that was uninhabitable. So be very careful. I mean, that's always good advice, no matter what state you're going to. But I'm just telling you what I know about Florida, however good that might be.
Right.
That being said, there's many ways that you can darken a home theater without painting the walls. And we've talked about it on this podcast a lot. I think I have an article in AV Gadgets about putting fabric up, which just requires a couple of staples. If it's, and just make sure you get the fireproof stuff, or the fire resistant, or whatever, fire rated
at the very least.
And you can darken the entire room that way. There's no paint at all. And the holes will be so small that you won't even have to patch anything. You can get around a lot of other stuff.
Start considering speaker stands, and maybe that projection setup becomes a 98-inch flat panel, if you can get it into your rental.
Yes. So let's talk about that in a minute. All right. Parker. Parker has a Parasound Zone Master 4 amplifier, which provides 150 watts times 4 channels. He uses to power his 4 Atmos speakers. Talk about overkill. The rest of the speakers are powered by a Sunflower. I don't know what I was trying to say there. I know what I was reading, but that's not what came out of my mouth. There's a good chance that dog's going to knock over that light. He's lying on the power cord. So if I spring up, because he's going to push it right into the projection screen, and it's going to be bad.
Great.
Sunfire Theater Grand 7201 amp. Everything is plugged into an APC J15 battery backup. Lately, his 4 Atmos speakers have started to hum as soon as he turns the system on. His other 7 speakers powered by the Sunfire amp are totally fine, no noise. If he turns down the gain adjustment on the Power Sound amp, the hum gets quieter. But if he turns it down low enough that he cannot hear the hum at all, his overhead speakers are way too quiet, and no amount of increasing the trim level for those speaker channels can get them loud enough again. Is the APC J15 to blame?
I doubt it. In this case, I doubt it very much.
In addition to being a battery backup, it is also a power conditioner, right? Would a different power conditioner fix this issue? No, it doesn't.
No, I don't think that's the cause here. We can be fairly certain it's not a ground loop, because a ground loop would not get any quieter when you turn the gain knob down on that external amp. This very much sounds like you have started to pick up some interference. The most likely culprit in that, because, I mean, it's a little unlikely that it's speaker wire. The most likely culprit in that is that it's the RCA cables that are going between the pre-outs that you're using and the inputs on that Zone Master 4 amplifier. You might be like, I didn't touch anything, but those connections can come a little bit loose, and that's all it takes is a slightly loose connection, just heat on daily use, heating up and cooling down, expansion and contraction. That can be enough. I mean, replacing RCA wires with some replacement ones that have a good, properly connected shield on both ends is a very inexpensive proposition if you want to just give that a try. But that would be my number one one suspect is that you have some interference that's creeping into your system. The most likely culprit is just the RCA cables going between your preamp outputs on your receiver or preamp and that Parasound amplifier. Other things you can check is, did you rearrange anything? Do you have any cables that are now draped over the top of another amplifier, including the speaker wires or the RCA cables? Because you can absolutely pick up interference that way. But this 100% sounds like interference that you're picking up, not a power problem that the APC or any other power conditioner would have anything to do with.
I agree. Oh, no, I already did that. Sorry. Nelson's attempting to use 4 subwoofers in his basement home theater. Space is very limited. Which begs the question why you decided to go with 4 subwoofers, but whatever. He really wants to go for a subwoofer in each corner, but he basically only has space for a 15-inch to 16-inch cube in 3 out of the 4 corners, and then the 4th corner is right by a door, so it needs to be even smaller. A 12-inch cube could fit. Mm-hmm. It wasn't entirely clear in his email if he already owned some or all of the subwoofer models that he mentioned, but he specifically said he intends to put 3 REL HT 1205 subs in 3 corners that they can fit. That can fit a 15 to 16-inch cube. The HT 1205 is a sealed 12-inch 500-watt subwoofer model that REL claims to play in-room down to 22 hertz at minus 6 dB.
What a set of
claim.
Specifications there, yes.
What
in-room, not anechoic, minus 6 dB.
That's like saying that your friend has a really good personality. That's what that is. It's like, you would like them. They have a good personality. Wait, what? You should go on a date with them. They have a good personality. What? No.
That's a 35 hertz sub right there. That's what that is.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
That's a bass module. He found the orb. Okay, first of all, this whole idea is terrible. Look, I'm sorry.
I'm not a gigantic fan of what's going on here. Yeah.
I don't know how what convoluted steps that you got to this point, but I am not saying that you as a person are bad or anything like that, but
heavens no.
Something has led you astray. And
yeah,
I would like to undo
slightly
that.
Strange. Yeah. Although this could be a case of I came across some used equipment. It was a fantastic deal. It cost me a song, and there you go. This is what I'm working with now. No problem with that if that's the case. But if you sought these out for physical reasons first, and then we're hoping that 22 hertz claim was for real, I guarantee it's not. You are not experiencing 22 hertz with those subs.
Shoved that in the world's smallest closet and then threw a microphone on the floor next to it and said, woohoo, 22 at minus 6 dB. So he's found the Orb Audio Super 8 sub, which is basically a 12-inch cube that could fit in the 4th corner next to the door. It's an 8-inch 200-watt ported design that claims minus 3 dB extension down to 28 hertz. At least that one's probably
that's not out of the question. That's I'd probably more like 32 realistically, but that's not out of the question.
So his receiver is a Denon X3600H, and he has a mini DSP 2x4 HD for connecting and calibrating all 4 subs. Will the 3 RELs and the single orb be able to work together? Technically, yes. You can make them all play at the same time. We've said that mixing different subwoofer driver sizes and mixing ported and sealed is okay as long as they have similar extension and sufficient output, correct? Will this setup meet those criteria? I can't say for sure. I almost want to say yes, because I don't think those, those RELs are going to be that far off of what that orb
from an 8-inch ported
claiming. Yeah, I don't want to say that they're going to be that far off, but I really don't think that this is a good idea, just as a whole. I think you should get 2 subwoofers.
Sure.
Fit into 2 of not the other corner, not the small corner,
not the smallest one corner by the door. No,
the 2 opposing other side of the rooms subwoofers that fit in the 15 to 16-inch cube area.
Sure.
Don't get an REL. Get something that actually plays down to 20 hertz.
Yeah.
That will fit there, and then just go 2 subs.
Like, and I'm like, could an SVS cylinder fit there? I mean, if it really is like if 16 inches is the absolute maximum, then it will.
We don't know how big this room is either, so we don't even know if these are properly sized. I mean, you might be looking at a room that, even though your space challenge could be you've got so much stuff in this ginormous room that you can't fit any subwoofers in there. Usually when somebody says it's space challenge, it means it's a small room, but we don't know that. You haven't told us.
Not for sure. Yeah.
This could be the case of these are seriously underpowered, underperforming subs
It is possible,
for the amount of space that you have. It could still be a small room that has challenges with space, but also challenges with not having a door that's open to the rest of the universe.
We don't know that, yeah.
So there are so many things we don't know here, but I can tell you that my answer definitively will be to get 2 subwoofers and not get 4.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so to finish my original thought, like the SVS cylinders, like the PC 2000 Pros that you could buy right now, they are 16.5 inches in diameter. But if this was a case that like a 16-inch cube can fit because that's the diagonal from corner to corner across that 16-inch cube, that's the dimension that needs to fit, then a 16.5-inch circle will be able to fit in there because it doesn't have those corner dimensions. But if it's literally from like front to back, side to side, you can't go bigger than 16. Do be aware that the cylinders are 16.5 inches, but if there's any wiggle room at all for a half an inch, I mean, a pair of PC 2000 Pros would crush beyond belief what these 4 rel subs, or if you
still
had
might be underpowered for your space. We don't know.
That is possible. We don't know the sizes, but we do know they objectively play louder and lower than those rel subs and that orb sub. Now, if it's just a hypothetical question, so I mean, if you have not bought these 3 rel subs and this orb Super 8 yet, I don't think I would recommend that you buy them. If you already own them, and this is an academic question of, are these 4 subwoofers, the 3 identical rels and then this single 8-inch ported one, are they close enough that they could academically be used together? I would say yes, actually.
I think so.
The extension and output differences are not going to be so ginormously different that you're going to have real difficulties. Also, if you've got a mini DSP 2x4 HD, you can use the multi-sub optimizer software, which is not going to send an identical signal to all 4 subs. It is going to tailor the output to each of those 4 subs individually to get them to work as cohesively as possible to provide the most uniform bass that you can. So that would absolutely be fine to do. But yeah, these are not the subs I would run out and buy at all. Regardless of what's going on with your room, these are not the 4 subs I would run out to buy. Yeah. But again, if you're getting them for $25 each, then you're not going to be able to get 2 PC 2000 Pros for that kind of price. So there's stuff to consider here.
It's unfortunate because if he had said I have four subs that are all identical, at least we could have said stack them.
I see.
you know what I mean? But the orb sub kind of throws it off.
A little bit. I mean, you could still do that.
Yeah. And again, I don't.
Nothing's playing down to 20 hertz with
so
those.
I wrote an article a long time ago called something along the lines of why 2 subs are better than 3 or even 4. And one of the things that this whole idea that you can, the 4 subs are the best is that it does give you even more even response across all of
uniformity.
Seats.
Uniformity across a larger seating area.
Yes. And that is, I'm not going to say that's not important, but it's a marginal increase from 2 subs properly placed as far as I'm concerned. So if you are thinking that to get the best possible response, the best bass in your room, you need 4 subs, I would challenge that. I would think that you can get such close performance out of 2 subs that I don't think most people would think that 4 subs are worth the money.
Yeah, the gap from 1 sub to 2 subs, enormous. The gap from 2 subs to 4 subs, a refinement.
Yes. So, I think I put that in the wrong one. I did. Yes, I did. So I guess that's kind of what I'd say is, you may have heard a lot of people saying 4 subs are the dream. I mean, a lot of things are dreams, and some dreams. Okay, I've got to move this dog. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if your goal is...
He is going to knock over that light.
If your goal is maximum uniformity, then yes, we're on board with the 4 subs. But if it's coming at the expense of extension, if you're saying the only way I can afford 4 subs is by going with smaller subs that cannot reach down to 20 hertz. I would not make that trade-off. I would much rather have 2 more expensive subwoofers that give the full performance that I'm after versus 4 where I'm having to compromise because of price or size or whatever else it might be. So yeah, that's the way I'd look at that. Let's move on to JR. JR is currently using a pair of SVS PC 2000 Pro cylinder subs, which I just recommended to our last listener, but he's got those in his dedicated basement home theater room. It is fully enclosed. He actually constructed a couple of walls in his basement to make sure that it would be, and the subs are positioned at the midpoints of his 2 side walls, which is definitely a recommended placement. This is not a perfectly rectangular room. It does have sort of a built-in section in the rear left corner, and it has a support column in that, but it's pretty close to being rectangular shape.
This is a gorgeous room.
It is a beautiful room that he's done here. Well
I am
treated.
very jelly.
Wonderful, like very neutral colors everywhere. Interesting things to look at when the lights are on. Yeah, gorgeous room. But yeah, there we go. We've got his 2 subs at the side walls, at the midpoints there.
So they've served him well, and he thinks they do a particularly good job of filling in the very lowest space that his old subwoofers never reached. But he feels like he used to have more slam with his old subs. He noticed that when he went over to his brother's place, the bass felt more visceral, and his brother is using a pair of SVS SB 2000 Pro sealed subs.
Yes, sealed, smaller.
He wants his system to deliver more punch, particularly with drums and bass guitar. He doesn't want to overpower things and to make them sound bloated or muddy, but he wants that kick and slam that seem to be missing now. Is that down to the different subwoofer design? Do his larger ported cylinder subs inherently have a different sound signature than versus the smaller sealed SB2000 Pro subs? Would switching to a different pair of subs deliver what he's hoping for in terms of slam and impact? You are experiencing more linear bass than your brother is, and you don't like it as much, and that's fine.
And so, that can be tuned.
That can be the case.
Without question, that can be, without adding anything. Like, even if you don't have any way of adding EQ other than the subs themselves, your subs themselves have a 3-band parametric EQ built into them, so you can do the equalization in the subs themselves. I mean, I know he has other ways of doing it, but you could do it right in the subwoofers themselves. So you definitely don't have to buy anything, and you can absolutely tune this to your liking.
Yes, and there's absolutely no, I swear to God, dog, you are killing me. I even plugged it into a different outlet. He's now resting his head on top of the light stand. He's so big.
Got to get that warmth.
He's nowhere near that thing. There's no warmth. He's just a goober. So there's no shame in, and this is what we've talked about over and over again in this podcast, is we want you to have linear bass. We want you to have the linear frequency response from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. We want that to be dead flat, if at all possible, right? It's almost impossible to achieve, but it would be great if it was dead flat. And then when you get that, it is at that point you say, but I don't like it.
Yep.
And this is what I don't like about it. And then we go, great. Here's how you EQ what you like about it.
Yeah, as a starting point, we're like, this is playing what the signal said to play. The signal said, be this loud, and that is how loud that note is. And then you say, but I like it when it's a bit louder in the lower bass than exactly what the signal said. Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing.
That's why EQ exists.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, you can go into your Odyssey editor app. I don't know what...
You could.
You can go into... I don't know if he's got that. I don't know where he is.
Might be a Denon that's down there in that image. I'm not totally sure, but he's got some Macintosh going on over there.
Definitely got some Macintosh going on. Yes. The subs themselves have EQs.
Yes.
We talked on the kick you in the chest bass,
right,
which is what you're talking about.
Which is higher in frequency than you think it is.
That's right. And you would do that. I think doing that at Odyssey, within the Odyssey editor app or whatever, you have, it's probably going to be more, it's going to eke over into your speakers that kick you in the chest bass. So,
yeah, because I mean, like the kick drum, that is going to be down maybe as low as 40 hertz. It's sort of like a 45 to 65 hertz type of range for that kick drum. So putting in a bit of a boost, and it doesn't have to be enormous. Like, start with a 3 dB boost, maybe, go up to a 6 dB boost from there. But right in that 45 to 65 hertz range, putting in a a bit of a mild hump there. Nothing wrong with that. Gives you that kick drum thump that it sounds like you're after. But for the bass guitar, that's considerably higher in frequency. I mean, yes, bass guitar is going down to 32 hertz at the lowest or something like that. But that's probably like when you're talking slam, right? Bass slam in your bass guitar, that's like 300 hertz. That's like 150 to 300 hertz type of range. And so that is going to be, more up into the low end of the speakers as opposed to the top end of the subwoofers at that point. And again, putting in a mild boost there, what a lot of people refer to as warmth. There's nothing wrong with doing that. People really like that. You probably, whether by accident or by design, or you listened to a bunch of things and you chose the one that had that without having applied any manual EQ before, that's what you got used to. That's what you like. Nothing wrong with that. So this can definitely be solved with EQ that you already own. Nothing you need to buy. Replacing your subs, it could happen by accident, that replacing your subs gives you what you want, but it's not a necessity in any way to replace those PC2000 Pro cylinder subs. They can 100%, play the frequencies that you need, and they can play certain ones a bit louder in response to having EQ'd them that way.
Yes. I'm looking for... All right, so I have... and I don't know if that's going to help with some of this, but I have an article called "Why Subwoofer Extension is Important," and it has a graphic in there that shows like and I'm sure I stole it from someplace, but it shows all the lots of the instruments and what frequency range they play. Frequency ranges they
actually, and don't just look at the very lowest frequency that it plays, because like I say, bass guitar, the slam in the bass guitar is not the very lowest note that a bass guitar can possibly play. It's much more up into the frequently used bass notes, and in that case, it's going to be like 150 to 300 hertz. It's going to be that octave that gives you that sort of slam that you're looking for. Right. The only other thing I want to mention, of course, is that you went over to your brother's place, so that's a different room.
It has nothing to do with the subwoofer.
It's
the
a different
subwoofers
system.
Themselves don't have a sound signature that you're going to recognize.
Thinking that it's the subwoofers that made that difference in sound, that is a misattribution. That's what's going on there.
It is the room. It is 100% the room. And maybe he has an EQ applied to you. I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Well, and we know his SP2000 Pros are not outputting as much bass between 20 and 40 hertz as your PC2000 Pros are. The other thing you can do is if you're just like, I just want to know whether it's sealed versus ported, you can seal your PC2000 Pro subs. That is an option. They came with a port plug. There's a switch built into them that says put them in sealed mode, and you can do that without spending any extra money if you just want to test that for yourself.
Yeah. It's weird that light is off over there. Jeff, is there a particular HDMI cable you'd like to recommend? He doesn't need anything crazy. The longest he needs is 10 feet, and the shortest is 3 feet. What would be the most future-proof choice, and what constitutes good quality? Sorry, I'm putting down my Coke. Mm-hmm. If he wants something that can handle all the latest 4K 120 signals and will also be ready for 8K, would it be worth spending extra, or could something inexpensive from one price still work just as well as anything else out there? So we are... What is that noise?
I don't know.
Okay, that's a weird noise. It sounds like they might be starting the races. There's there's Indy race here in St. Pete.
Oh, okay.
And I'm close enough to it that when they start the cars practicing around the track and stuff like that, it's all blocked off downtown. They you can hear it. Sounds like bees. Mm-hmm. Constantly. Anyways, I've never actually been to it. I really want to go, but I've never actually been to it. Okay, so we have certified cables now. If for a long time it was just, I don't know, to trust what they say. But now HDMI has the certified cables. I want to warn you against future proofing with HDMI, because there is none. Okay, no matter what they say. Yep. No matter what the manufacturers claim that their devices support or their cables support, there is no guarantee that when they actually implement new features like 8K, which doesn't really exist, it kind of does, but it doesn't really exist. Yeah. There's no guarantee that anything you buy today will actually support what they say it will support theoretically in the future.
Well, yeah, like because even the ultra high speed HDMI cables. That's the highest certification we have right now. Ultra high speed, 48 gigabits per second. And we have cables, and we're going to mention some that meet that certification. But the top spec there is 8K resolution at 60 frames per second. So if we end up with 8K at 120 frames per second, we're going to need a new spec that goes beyond 48 gigabits per second. And whatever you buy today is not going to meet that. But we can get you certified ultra high speed HDMI cables that pass 48 gigabits per second. And yeah, Monoprice is a great solution.
I think so.
They actually have a really nice offering right now. This is going beyond just the certification. They put in a few extras here. First and foremost, it is CL3 in-wall rated.
Nice.
So that is a consideration. The jacket is braided, which makes it very, very not, I guess, proof, but like very resistant to ever sort of tangling.
As somebody who just had to untangle a couple of speaker cables that had braided sheaths, I will tell you, it is not proof.
It's not proof, but it helps a little bit. But that in-wall rating can sometimes be important. And then what I really like on these particular ones is really robust strain relief. So you're very unlikely to have a frayed connection due to bending or anything like that. And then they actually put in sort of a latching system on these plugs. So we had a listener last week who was talking about, that HDMI jack connection. It started to get a little loose. These put a little extra friction, a little extra grip on that friction grip itself. It's not like a fully screwing in or snap connector or something like that, but they've put these little sort of latching grooves in there that add a bit more friction to that fit there. So they're available all the way up to 25 feet. They have all sort of links in between. The 25-foot length is $30. The 10-foot length, the longest you said you need, is $15. I don't think we're breaking the bank here, and they are absolutely 100% fully ultra high speed certified. For the really short ones, the 3-foot ones that you mentioned, I like going with as thin as you possibly can. And Monoprice has their ultra slim, again, certified 48 gigabits per second, ultra high speed, exceedingly skinny thin, almost hair-like thin HDMI cables that they have, the longest length of which is 3 feet for $4.50. So again, not breaking the bank, but they don't go any longer than 3 feet when they're that skinny. If you need something almost as skinny, but all the way up to 5 feet maximum, Zeskit is another one that is always ultra high speed certified, has the QR code and the hologram and all of that. They have 1.5 foot, 3 foot, and 5-foot ultra skinny cables. The 5-foot length from Zeskit is $13. So, it's triple the price of that 3-foot one from Monoprice, but still pretty reasonable at $13 if that's what you need. And then Zeskit also has a nice offering with their X-Tech, which makes it really, really flexible. That's what the X-Tech is all about. It's a really, really flexible lengths as long as 8 feet. So not quite reaching the 10-foot one that you needed, but if you need some 6-foot and 8-foot ones, and it would help for them to be really, really flexible, the Zeskit X-Tech matches that. The 8-foot length is $29. That's the most expensive one we've come across yet. But if you go between Monoprice and Zeskit, you're going to be in good shape.
All the rest of our questions are very long.
Are they all very long?
I think so. I just scrolled to the bottom of this thing. And
if we can do at least one more, I think
we'll do Ryan, and then we're going to be done.
That'll be good.
So Ryan has decided to go with the Wii for his whole house audio setup.
WII capital M. They want to say WIM. We say WEAM because they chose WII for
stupid.
their name.
And I'm not the boss of me. I'll say it how I want. He's going to put a Wii amp and a pair of bookshelf speakers in almost every room in his house. He also has a fully dedicated home theater in the basement and a 2-channel listening room upstairs. But of the living room, his wife has put her foot down. She does not want to pair.
In. I don't know why I typed of there, but yes, in the living room.
All right. In the living room, his wife has put her foot down. I'm like Ron Burgundy. You just put anything on there, I'll read it.
That's right.
She does not want a pair of bookshelf speakers placed on either side of the TV. The only form factor she will accept is an unobtrusive soundbar. Okay, Ryan, this is your chance. Before we go on, get the world's crappiest soundbar. Get one that just sounds like straight.
Oh, that's pretty easy. Yeah.
And then say, this is what you want, honey. I gave you what you want. And if you could find one that's also expensive, but still garbage, then
also not that hard.
She's going to be making the case for you for why you need to have bookshelf speakers back in there. Anyways, Ryan says he's totally fine with that. Maybe not anymore. As long as it has an optical audio input, you can still connect a Wii device to it, and it can still be part of their whole house audio setup. The other catch is that the soundbar needs to be rather inexpensive. Ha-ha. Tell her that's not possible. Pushing the price over $200 probably isn't going to fly. He found a Vizio V-Series V15X-J6.
51X, because it's a 5.1.
Oh, 5.1.
V51X J6.
That fits the size and price constraint. Should you go with that, or do we have a suggestion for something else that sounds better? Absolutely not. Get the worst sounding thing possible. Thank you.
So
worst.
Yeah. So this doesn't meet either, because this is not what I would recommend if you want the best sound possible at this price point, but it is not the worst sounding thing at the $200 price point. So it doesn't meet either of our criteria. So, I mean, I went in this with the assumption of actually trying to get what you would ask for, which is, what can we get in this form factor, the best sound quality for around $200? I am going to stick with Vizio. I'm going to stick with an older model because ever since, so they use the letter at the end to denote the year that it came out. At the H year, I forget what that was. I think that was 2020, might have been 2021. But the H year was like the last good year when they went to the J's and the K's. Everything got worse, other than the Elevate soundbars. The Elevate soundbars were okay. I think there's a K series Elevate soundbar, but the J's and K's of everything else that Vizio started making got worse. It's only going to get worse from here now that they're owned by Walmart. I don't expect the sound quality to get better from this point on.
That actually go through, or are they still just planning that?
That is done now. I mean, obviously the sale is not final, but the agreement is in place for $2.3 billion for Walmart to buy Vizio, and all they talked about in the press release was how they want that advertising content and customer information. They don't care about the TVs or the soundbars or how good they are or anything like that. They just want the name and the information. But the Vizio SB36, that's the width of the soundbar, 51 because it's 5.1. N, I don't know why there's a little N, but there is, -H6, because that H model year was the good year. And that is available basically on clearance from Best Buy for $180. And the H6 is considerably better than the J that you were looking at. But if you want the worst sound, go ahead and get that J. But it's not bad enough that it's going to have your wife crying out to get rid of it. You'd want to get something crappier than that J one that you looked at if you want that to go on. But if you do want better for even less money, SB3651 and H6. I will also say Monoprice has some fairly decent soundbars at very low prices. Andrew over at AV Gadgets reviewed the SB500, which is the 5.1 version, usually sells for $230. It is out of stock right now. The SB600, which is the Atmos version, sells for $250, a whole whopping $20 more. It doesn't have any additional drivers. It doesn't have upfiring drivers or anything. It's just got the processing. It's just compatible with an Atmos signal and has the processing, but it's going for $250. That's over the $200 price point that you said that you wanted there, but that could be an option going on there.
He often listens to music at night, and he'll go to bed thinking about how great it sounded in his listening room, but he fires up his system again the next evening. He could swear that for the first 30 minutes or so, it merely sounds good, not great, like the night before. However, after he's been listening to a half an hour or so, he thinks it starts to sound great again, not just good. What's going on? Is he going insane? Could his gear actually be warming up and changing its sound slightly, or is this just his brain getting used to the sound again? It might be the alcohol kicking in.
Could be that. Do you have tubes? Do you have tube amps?
That is literally the only thing that's the first thing that came to my mind too. It's like, do you have tube amps? Because if you have tube amps, then yes.
They legitimately warm up and change their sound.
They do. And so if you have a tube amplifier someplace in your system that is powering your two speakers or your
because he says he has a dedicated 2-channel listening room, and it's not out of the question you got a tube amp going on in there, or a tube preamplifier also.
Yeah, anything that has tubes in it. Otherwise, it is psychoacoustics. Your sound is not changing. No. Could just be you're getting more comfortable, you're relaxing. There could be a lot of physiological reasons that you are experiencing the sound different. Could be you close the door, could be the room warms up and you're more comfortable. I mean, there could be 1,000 things that are making you feel like it sounds better when it's actually not sounding any different.
There can be a quite legitimate like brain, there's not the equipment changing, but your human brain adjusting, because I've seen a lot of people's dedicated 2-channel listening rooms that have nary an acoustic treatment in sight. And your brain does adapt to these surroundings to filter out. I mean, you know how there can be a sound. You walk into a room and you're like, what is that sound going on? But you have no control over that sound. And as long as that sound stays fairly constant, you stay in that room for a half hour or so, and you might swear when you walk out of that room that the sound stopped.
Yeah.
Right? Like you just stop noticing it, even though it's still there. And your brain is very good at filtering that out. It can do the same thing with acoustic distortions that are happening in your room. If you're getting some, fairly nasty reflections, or even not all that nasty, because he's like, sound system always sounds at the worst good and at the best great. But you might have some uncontrolled reflections happening in your room. Nothing to do with the equipment. It's still making those reflections. Nothing changed in terms of what it's outputting in, and the room didn't change its acoustics. But your brain will adapt over the course of 20 to 30 minutes to filter out negative acoustic impacts that are going on there. Your brain can absolutely adjust to those things in that sort of time span.
Yes. And again, that's not the speakers or the gear sounding different. It's you hearing it differently.
Absolutely. But it's not just a, like, I imagined it difference. Like your brain really does adapt. There is a physiological change going on inside of your brain. So that it could very easily be that.
When I was growing up, there was the town I lived in had a beet processing plant. Beet processing. They use it.
The vegetable.
The vegetable. They use it for sugar beets, and they make sugar out of it.
Yeah.
And it smelled awful. You would drive by it on the highway. It was south of town. I don't remember. South of town, and as you drove by it, you would smell it and be like, "Oh my god, that place!" I mean, it was a mile away. I mean, you could see it, but it wasn't near anything else either. So it was kind of out there in the middle of nowhere, and it smelled awful. But I knew people that worked there, and they're like, "I don't even smell it anymore."
Yeah,
I don't smell it anymore.
Or the teenager with their stinky room. You walk into their bedroom, and they're perfectly fine. They have no idea anything smells in there, and you walk in as the parent, and you're like, "God, it reeks in here." So yeah. Nose blind, ear blind.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So, all right, I was writing something down. He was watching an audio channel on YouTube. The guy was saying that sometimes by mistake, some speakers can come from the factory with inverse polarity on the speaker binding post. He said to try reversing your speaker wires on both of your stereo speakers so that black on the amplifier goes to red on the speaker end and red goes to black. He assured everyone that doing this will not hurt your speakers. Is that true? Is it worth trying? Is there any potential harm to anything? It will not hurt your speakers. There's no potential harm to anything, and it will do nothing. It doesn't fix the problem that he's talking about.
Right.
Like,
if you
it doesn't fix
both,
anything. If you switch to both, then it's now the other one is whichever one was wrong is now right. Whichever one was right is now wrong. So it doesn't make any difference. Yeah. You've done nothing. It's stupid. Don't do that. Don't ever watch that channel.
So I mean, we have heard of internally it got miswired. That's
happened to me.
Out of the realm of
that's happened to me.
Yeah.
Not only that, I have had speakers in for review many, many years ago where the tweeter was was wired backwards.
Okay, sure.
And I was like, dude, something sounds wrong with these things.
To the crossover inside. Yeah.
And basically, I had to open it up, and they're like, oh yeah, it's wire. Just switch the wires. I switched the wires. That was
plus
fine.
Went to minus went to plus. Yeah. That's what it was. But yeah, if you make that switch between your amplifier and your pair of speakers on both speakers, you will not notice any difference in sound. That would be a case where if you heard it, it was purely psychoacoustic, nothing physiologically changed anywhere, and you just imagined it because you were told and prepped to imagine that you hear a difference. But if you, of course, reverse the polarity on one of the speakers and not the other, well, that is going to inverse the polarity on one of the speakers compared to the other. And if it was internally wired incorrectly, then you just corrected it externally. That's what would go on there.
I will tell you that.
Doing both does nothing. It won't hurt anything. If you try it, it won't hurt anything. Go ahead.
Even if you just switch on one versus the other, it doesn't make any difference. Yeah.
Now you'll lose your stereo phantom center. That's all.
Yes, that's all. All of my apparently when I cannot remember how I don't remember how I wired up the surround speakers that are in wall. So when I've been switching speakers around over the years, I kind of look at the speaker wire, which is not red and white, or red and black. It is like one with a line on it, one without a line on it. I can't remember if the line in one is red or the line one is black. What I did. So every time I do the stuff I just did within here, I always get the phase error on the Odyssey because both the speakers are out of phase.
Yeah.
He was okay. can we explain what 4 ohm or 8 ohm or 6 ohm speakers really mean? Sure, we can look up the specs. Almost all speaker manufacturers will list something like 4 ohms nominal or compatible with 8 ohms. But how can you, as the owner, actually know and confirm for sure how many ohms your speakers are? Well, if you have a 6 ohm speaker, but your receiver amplifier only gives you a 8 or 4 ohm output setting, does it potentially harm anything not to have a matching 6 ohm setting in the receiver? And if you're using a 4 ohm speaker, should you also make sure you connect it to a receiver amp with a 4 ohm setting? Okay, so the short version of this is only thing that 4 ohm setting does in your AV receiver is limit output so that a harder to drive speaker will not damage your receiver or potentially call for so much power that the receiver goes and shuts down. Okay, that's
or overheats.
Or overheats. That's the only reason that there's a 4 ohm setting in your AV receiver.
It is a current limiter. That is what it limits the amount of current that comes out of that amplifier or AV receiver.
The advice given by literally everybody, except for AV speaker manufacturers, receiver manufacturers, who are trying to limit any culpability they may have and limit the number of potential calls they get from people, is to leave it in the 8 ohm mode at all times, and just be careful not to connect really hard to drive speakers to it, and then try to play them at concert levels. So that's the short version. The rest of this is a little bit more complicated. So if you're looking for an AV receiver and you've got speakers that say 4 ohm or 8 ohm or 6 ohm, you leave your receiver in 8 ohm and then you deal with the speakers in a different way. So 4 ohm nominal, 8 ohm nominal, 6 ohm nominal. What if you look at the frequency response of a speaker? It's not a straight line from A to B. It's not like I play from 20 kilohertz down to 80 hertz and then it drops off like a rock. It's like a shelf there, and it's completely flat in between. It's like a jagged line. Okay, your impedance is even worse. It'll be like have huge peaks,
very swoopy.
Huge swoops up and huge swoops down and everything else. So what is 4 ohm, 8 ohm, or 6 ohm nominal? It means that, generally speaking, it's not going to... Go ahead.
There is a definition for what a nominal impedance rating on a speaker is supposed to be.
Now, whether or not that is a different question.
Whether they've accurately done that is very questionable, but there is a definition of what it is supposed to be. And the idea is, the vast majority of speakers that we're getting are at least a two-way design, right? A woofer and a tweeter, or maybe it's a three-way design, a woofer, a mid-range, and a tweeter. But what you will see if you just took a single driver, nothing else, and you just measured the impedance via a frequency sweep. So we started off down at 40 hertz for the bass woofer, and we measure what the impedance is at that frequency, and then we play a frequency sweep and we measure the impedance all the way along. And what you'll basically see is a U shape, a saddle shape. It'll have higher impedance down at the lowest note that woofer can play. And then as you approach the natural resonant frequency of that driver, it'll hit the lowest impedance that it has.
And which remember, basically low impedance is harder to drive than high impedance.
And it means that current is flowing into that thing like nobody's business because there's basically no physical resistance to the electricity flowing at the natural resonant frequency of that driver. We don't really want to use a driver down there. We either want to protect that, or particularly if it's a mid-range driver, we would set the crossover on the low end of that mid-range driver well above that frequency. We don't really want to reach down there. Then you'll see the impedance climb back up, and then it'll dip back down again. Now, so after that initial very lowest point, we see it climb, and then it dips back down, and the lowest it gets on that second dip, which will be a higher frequency. It'll be, in a bass woofer, it'll be 50 hertz or something like that. That lowest point on that second dip, second from the bottom, is supposed to be what you rate your speaker as the nominal impedance of that speaker. Now, many do not.
Right.
You will sometimes see the impedance frequency graph on the speaker, and you'll say, hey, there's that second dip, and it got down to 4.6 ohms, and they still rate it as an 8 ohm nominal speaker. And we can't really do much about that, but that is the literal definition of what it is supposed to be. That second dip above the resonant frequency of the driver itself, and the lowest it gets is where you're supposed to rate it. And so many speakers, technically speaking, should probably be rated at a lower nominal impedance than they are.
And but the problem is that most of the time it's not a problem. People are sitting close enough to their speakers, and they are not playing them as loud as they could be playing.
Or they're crossing them over to a subwoofer, and they are really not ever going to be playing that lowest frequency where they hit their lowest impedance with any frequency or any high output the vast majority of the time. And then the rest of the speaker, you're looking at it, okay, it goes into a mid-range driver, and the lowest the impedance of that mid-range driver ever gets is like 12 ohms. And then you go into the tweeter, and the lowest it ever gets is like 28 ohms.
Right.
And so you're like, okay, if you connect this to an 8 ohm rated amplifier, we're not going to have a problem. And so they'll say 8 ohms compatible or something like that. The ones that are rated at like 4 ohms or 6 ohms, like sometimes they dip a little lower than that, but those are usually quite a bit closer to the actual technical rating of what the speaker should be. So like when you see the ELAC speakers and they're rated at 6 ohms nominal, like that's actually really accurate.
Yeah.
Like the lowest they get is like 5.98 ohms.
Oh my God, it's a 6 ohm speaker.
They're not 8 ohm speakers, but they're every bit as easy to drive as almost any 8 ohm nominal rated speaker that you've ever come across. And so that's why there is that technical definition.
Companies like Emotiva that will maybe be more accurate in their ratings, oh, this is a 4 ohm speaker, but then they'll tell you, but you don't have to have an amp with these. You can drive these with a receiver and
monoprice too. Like
monoprice is the same way.
They're very honest with their ratings. Like when their subwoofer says it's the -3 dB point is like 42 hertz, and you're like, gosh, that sounds like it must be a crappy subwoofer. It's like, no, they're just actually honest. Like it really is 3 decibels quieter in an anechoic setting at 42 hertz. It also doesn't dip like crazy lower than that, and it really does get down to 20 hertz. So yeah, when you're really honest in the ratings, that's why they play these numbers games, because if you're really honest, it appears worse than everybody else's numbers that they fudged a little bit. Yeah.
Unless you can be like Harman Kardon and then convince everybody that you have real amps, real watts instead of everybody else's fake watts.
But yes, leave your AV receiver setting to the 8 ohm setting. Leave it there. And I think we described what 4 ohm, 8 ohm, 6 ohm really means. There's the technical explanation, and then there's the sort of real world fudging that almost everybody does.
So we have left, Rob.
We have on our list Daz. I got to scroll down a bit because there's a whole bunch going on there. Todd, Dean, and I believe there's one more below all of these pictures. Yes, Jonathan's on the list as well. Jonathan was sort of like, I made his more generalized because it's just something I want to talk about. I generalized his question.
All right,
Don't worry, Jonathan.
Do that next week.
No specifics.
All right, I want to thank our listeners of the week. Become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. When they do that is going to patreon.com/AVRant podcast and sign up to become a monthly contributor. We want to thank our 130 patrons this week.
We sure do. That's patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 130 paying patrons over there.
I want to thank Dean for giving me permission to use his photos on AV Gadgets.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Dean.
And thanks those who sent us notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, from Parker, Adriano, Jeff, Ryan, Todd, Gurinder, and Jorge. Thank you very much.
You betcha. I'll say those names one more time. Parker, Adriano, Jeff, Ryan, Todd, Gurinder, and Jorge. Thank you for your notes of encouragement and gratitude. We very much appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, if you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You have to ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.